No revenge is too small. I was a server for a while at an Italian restaurant. A group of teenagers came in, very clearly a sports team of some kind. I don't expect much in the way of a tip from them because teenagers, but that's never stopped me from giving good service. They're rowdy AF, constantly making me run back and forth for every little thing they could think of, just being all around D-bags. I noticed a few of them had taken off their coats. When it came time for the bill, they asked me to get a pitcher of water for them to share before they left. So I did, and when I got back, they were all gone without paying. Awful, right? Except these absolute morons forgot they were wearing their jackets that said local high school wrestling team. You bet I immediately called the school. You bet I told everybody I talked to that the team had stolen from the restaurant. You bet when my step-uncle showed up and told them that they stole from his niece, that every single one of their lives were made more miserable for the rest of the season, I was okay with that. I also got paid for that check, and a 40% tip. Then, down in the comments, we have this story from Technos. It was the tennis team that tried that at my high school, but it was even worse. Their jackets had their last names on them, in letters so big even the sucky 1990 CCD cameras near the register could read. Oh, and the hostess went to school with them. The manager didn't even bother with the police or the school. She went for the nuclear option, grabbed a copy of the church phone book from her car and straight up called their grandmothers. Hi, this is Sherry from church. Do you have the number of idiot's parents? He just dashed on his dinner tab here at the restaurant, and I can't find. Oh, you will? Thank you. I'll expect him soon. That is absolutely brutal. Our next Reddit post is from Touch the Effing Frog. Today, I got a call from the school my 9-year-old attends asking to please come up to the school because my daughter was in trouble for vandalizing another child's property. This surprised me because my daughter is a bit of a goody two-shoes and never gets in trouble. So I dropped what I was doing and swung by the school to find my daughter sitting in the principal's office grinning ear to ear. I was ushered in to take a seat. The principal immediately launched into a tirade about how my daughter had deliberately broken another girl's necklace and how unacceptable it was. Once he was finished, I turned to my daughter to hear her side of the story. Last year, my daughter saved up pocket money to buy best friend necklaces for her and this girl. I ordered them from Wish.com for her. This year, the friendship went belly up when I discovered this girl was trying to extort her friends, including my daughter, into buying her expensive items on a kid's game with threats, backstabbing my daughter, and threatening anyone who dared play with her at lunch, so she was completely isolated. My daughter cut off contact and has been rebuilding her friendship circle, and all was going well until this little girl started repeatedly demanding that my daughter give her the other half of the friendship necklace so she could give it to someone else. The fact that we were the ones that bought the necklaces to begin with was apparently a minor irrelevant detail. My 18-year-old niece and nephew are very protective of their younger cousins and were quite upset for her, so they decided to offer her the opportunity for therapeutic destruction. Last weekend, they got out their tools and helped my daughter shatter the charm into 7 or 8 pieces with a hammer, some pliers, and had a great time. My daughter put the pieces of the charm in her jewelry box as a reminder of what fake friends can do to you. Anyway, apparently, this girl kept demanding the necklace every day, hassling her, so my daughter hatched a plan. She gathered up the pieces into a little bag, took them to school today to empty the bag in front of the girl, and told her she was welcome to the necklace as long as she likes jigsaw puzzles, but she'll probably need some glue. Apparently, the girl went red and stormed off to a teacher to say that my daughter had destroyed her necklace and my daughter was sent to the office. I couldn't keep a straight face and burst out laughing. You could see the vein in the principal's forehead pop out as he looked at me laughing. I pulled out my phone, showed him my purchase history to confirm that we bought the necklaces and my daughter is perfectly within her rights to destroy her own property if she so wishes. He finally dismissed us and my daughter skipped back to class laughing hysterically. My niece and nephew are quite proud and planning to take my daughter out for ice cream this weekend to celebrate her standing up for herself. Don't you just love it when teachers and principals just automatically assume that one student is right and doesn't even bother to ask what the other student has to say? Our next Reddit post is from Christie's here. I lived in a corporate relocation apartment for 3 months while relocating for a job. I started getting collection calls for the previous occupant almost immediately. They called multiple times a day. It would wake up my kids during naps, after bedtime, weekends, you name it. I started by politely letting them know I wasn't the person they were looking for. Nicely, rudely, begging, you name it. They were incredibly rude and refused to tell me their names, name of their supervisor, etc. I was at my wit's end. After one particularly nasty encounter, I snapped. I started Googling their corporate officers, etc. I found that the CEO and CFO had very unusual names and quickly discovered they had publicly listed phone numbers. Yes, it was not a huge bank, and this was early 2000s before people were exclusively using cell phones. This was approximately 8 p.m. on a Sunday night. I called each number explaining that since I kept receiving collection calls from their company in spite of not being the person that they sought, every time they called me, I would call them. I left my phone number and name and hung up. Not even 10 minutes later, I got a call from their IT department asking for all the pertinent info. Who the customer was, my name and how to spell it. I never got a call from them again. I hope someone got fired. OP, you were way too polite about it. You should have just forwarded the collection calls to the CEO himself. Then the CEO's own employees would be calling their CEO to hassle him about paying up. Yeah, someone would pay all right. Our next Reddit post is from 5frogmargin. About 5 years ago, I saw someone lose their smartphone in real time. I was driving behind her and saw it fly off the top of her car on a busy one-lane highway. It was a little dangerous, but I pulled over, waited for a break in traffic, and darted out to grab the phone. It was miraculously unharmed. Her background pic showed a 20-ish redhead and a boyfriend who looked like a suckier version of FaZe Banks. I kept driving around doing my errands until her phone rang about 30 minutes later. I told her where the phone had flown off the roof, how I retrieved it, and mentioned she must have put it there while getting gas or something. Her response? Okay, could you bring it to me here in my town, 40 minutes away, please? I work at a pizza joint. That's nowhere near me. I'm in another town. You can pick it up here. I'll meet you at the Dunkin' Donuts. I can't drive all the way to your town. I don't know your town. Let's meet halfway at a popular restaurant. That's not even remotely halfway. That restaurant is still in your town. Wanna just pick it up later? I don't have time for this. And she puts the boyfriend on the phone. Dude, what's your effing problem? Give her back her phone already. This went on for a few minutes, boyfriend getting tougher and tougher. I have zero tolerance for this sucky behavior, so I hung up on them and shut off the phone. I was going to visit my grandfather the next day, so I kept the phone on me until then. When I got to my granddad's town, 2 hours away, I turned the phone on, called the girl's father, and told him everything. He was very apologetic, and I'm guessing it wasn't his first rodeo. I told him due to her rudeness and her boyfriend's thinly veiled threats, the phone could now be picked up at the local police station in my granddad's hometown. Her dad's response? Looks like she'll have a 3-hour drive both ways this weekend. Sorry again. Why would you be rude to someone who has possession of your $1,000 smartphone? What's stopping the person from just being like, you know what, never mind, I think I'll just sell it. Bye. Our next Reddit post is from Celestius. My country's trains have a slightly infamous issue with people wrongfully taking seats that have been reserved in advance. When you book a seat, and you always get to pick your seat when booking online, your name, or reservation number if you want to stay anonymous, gets displayed over your seat. There were some issues with the reservations not coming up properly, which eventually got resolved, but people got used to the chaos of having to duke it out to get your correct seat. In response, the railway company started introducing customer service agents. In reality, these staff are part ticket inspectors, part security. This story takes place about 1 week after these ticket agents were introduced. So I boarded my train, returning to the city I live in after visiting my family for the weekend. The train was about halfway along its route, and there were a lot of empty seats. This is important. When I arrived at my seat, my name was above it. I found it occupied by a dude about halfway through a 6-pack of beer. I told him that was my seat and asked if he could move to one of the many unoccupied seats on the carriage. He refused and started cursing me out about it, saying he got there first and I could sit in one of the unoccupied seats. Generally being a bit of a bastard, throwing his empty cans out into the aisle. At this point, I could have given one of the customer service guys a head up and have them persuade the guy to move to one of the empty seats. But honestly, that didn't feel satisfying enough. Cue petty revenge. Looking above his head, I could see that the seat next to him was booked from 3 stops down the line. I also knew that 2 stops down the line was when most commuters got on the train. I plonked myself down in the other pre-booked seat directly next to this dude rather than sitting in one of the unreserved seats. This douchebag in my seat settled back down with his cheap beer and started blasting music from his phone. 2 stops down the line, this train fills up completely. Standing room only from then on. The stop after that, the lady who booked the seat I was currently sitting in got on. I explained the situation to her, and together we grabbed one of the customer service dudes. I got my seat, the lady got her seat, and douchebag got to stand outside the pisser for the 2 hours left on the journey. So this guy had to stand while drunk on a moving train while smelling the bathroom? That couldn't have been very pleasant for him. Our next Reddit post is from Captain Trick. When I was 16, I took 10th grade in an art school. Mondays and Fridays were spent doing regular schoolwork, and the rest of the week was pure art heaven. There were 3 workshops, and you would dedicate yourself to one of them for the whole year. There was clothing design, more general design, and animation. I was in animation with all the geeks. At one point, the school was commissioned by a new section at a hospital. I do believe it was the children's section, but I'm not sure. To decorate their new hallways, and the prompt we got from them was the red thread. We were always told from the get-go that we would not be paid or even allowed to show up for the reception because that was only for the important people in town. So think mayors, doctors, CEOs, and all that lame stuff. Now, when you ask someone to do you a favor and have the nerve to have an attitude about it as well, and the someone you ask the favor of is an entire school full of artistic 16 to 18-year-olds in the mid-2000s, you are in deep trouble. We took the red thread theme very, very, very seriously. It wasn't even something we talked about across the workshops, but the entire week you could feel the resentment hang in the air, and we used that resentment to fuel our creativity. We spent a week making nightmare fuel art. Every single one of us. The clothing designers made nurse outfits caked in blood with red thread stitched into the white fabric and took knives to the skirts to shred it. Even got a morphine bag and filled it with fake blood and attached it to one of the costumes. The designers made horrific sculptures of broken anatomy, twisting in pain, and silent screams. The animation students, aka my crowd, did all kinds of crazy stuff. I made an abstract painting with a friend where we attached plaster to the canvas to make it look like it was oozing blood and pus. Every single piece of art looked like it came straight from Silent Hill. But every one of them had a red thread pulsing through the disgusting artwork, so we did what we were told. We had the artwork delivered, and we never heard from the hospital. Not even a thank you note or anything, lol. I think what I appreciate the most is that the teachers and the headmaster of our school just let us do what we wanted and seemed to accept that this collab was a complete disaster. This hospital was rude to a bunch of edgy teens and expected them to just comply? How stupid can you be? Our next Reddit post is from Alex saying that. So, I work in this small family-owned office that runs 24/7. There's about 25 employees total, but in the office, there's only like 12 of us. The rest work off-site. There's a woman who works here, we'll call her Jill. Jill is almost 40 and has been here about 10 years. For reference, I've been here just over 4 years, since I've been hired, and from what I hear for her entire employment, she has never agreed to switch shifts with anyone. Not once. Not a single time has she ever done anyone a favor, no matter what. Yet she has no issue constantly asking other people to switch shifts with her. A year into my employment, my brother needed emergency surgery and I begged her to cover my shift the next day, and all she said was, "Sunday's my only day to sleep in. Sorry." I never forgot that. Whatever, she's not obligated to switch shifts. It's her prerogative if she wants to be universally disliked by our entire office. Anyway, Jill got pregnant about 7 months ago, completely accidentally, and was actually quite freaked out about it for a while. She's pretty much been nauseous her entire pregnancy, and even keeps a trash can next to her desk just in case she can't make it to the bathroom. Yesterday, she was feeling really sick, and around 12:30 p.m. she asked our boss if she could leave early. He told her she could leave if she could get someone to agree to finish her shift. Our shifts are mainly 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., then 3 to 11 p.m., and 11 to 7 a.m., with periodic split shifts thrown in as needed. I was working morning yesterday, scheduled to leave at 3 p.m., and she was scheduled until 7 p.m. The only other person who could have stayed for her had plans right after his shift, so I was her only option. She waited until 2:45 p.m. and then sauntered up to my desk, puppy dog eyes fully engaged, and asked me to stay for the rest of her shift because she was feeling really ill. Now, I'm on Reddit a lot, and I never forgot that post about the sucky manager refusing to allow her employees to be at her dying son's bedside. There's a line in that text exchange that I loved and have been waiting for the perfect moment to use, and this was it. I swivel to face her, look her right in the eyes, trail my eyes down to her bulging, unplanned pregnant stomach, and pointedly say, "A lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part," and just swivel back and continue working without another word. It was glorious. Her face instantly dropped. It looked like someone farted into her mouth the way it twisted. She didn't say a thing and just waddled away back to her desk, absolutely furious. 15 minutes later, I stand up and loudly announce my departure, and that if anyone needs me, I'll be at home taking a nap. That was r/Petty Revenge, and if you like this video, then please hit that subscribe button because I put out new Reddit content every single day.
Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. I had an affair with my father and it ruined my life. 9 sick and effed up confessions of Reddit. I attempted murder at 13 and the guilt is preventing me from being a person. To preface, I am doing much better mentally, but as you may or may not imagine, something like this doesn't exactly just leave your conscience too easily. With that said, this is my confession. The title really says it all, but this body is where the details are. I was a disturbed child, to say the least. I was born from the union of a woman selling her body for crack and a man accepting her offer, so not the best start. By the time I was 2 years old, I had a scar on my forehead from a terrazzo windowsill and a fractured skull from being dropped, from which I still have a large batch of colorless hair. I say this because I hope what I am is simply a result of bad genes and early head trauma, but I know I am probably wrong. I was raised from 2 to 13 by my father's parents, 2 upper-middle-class 50-somethings in a pretty well-off neighborhood. I was a good kid, save for the occasional random act of violence. Fast forward to 11 years old, I was already severely depressed, self-harming in sincerity, being drunkenly screamed at 3 a.m., the works. By 12 I was starting to become psychotic, intensely paranoid, and about as emotionally dead and distant from others as possible. I was beginning to slash myself with 100+ smaller gashes at a time just to feel something and watch myself leak. When I was 13, I got kicked out of middle school for slashing my mouth open in a smile and painting the bathroom walls with myself. 2 to 3 weeks later, Friday, January 9, 2015, the last piece of myself fell into the void of the madness. I destroyed my home the best of 5'0" 13-year-old could, tore myself the hell up, decapitated my cat, and stabbed my grandmother in the abdomen, right over her liver. She lived, but I was told that if the knife had gone even 1/4 inch deeper she would have reflexively doubled over, and given my state it would have been a much more gruesome scene than it already was. A SWAT team came and subdued me, took me to a facility to stabilize for 3 days, and carted me off to juvenile detention. I was acquitted of attempted murder, but charged pretty heavily regardless and have only gotten off probation about 2 years ago, or 3 years post-incident. I spent those 3 years in high-security juvenile asylums for lack of a better term, because there was no real treatment or answers for what my problem was. I'm undeniably way healthier and more in control of myself now, but I still experience a lot of really heavy depersonalization and near-total emotional repression. Personally, I think it's from guilt, so here I am. Feel free to voice your opinion of me below. I doubt anyone even on here can say something about me that I haven't heard already. I wish my sister would just overdose or get killed and be done with it. My sister is 31, I'm 36 and male. I really do hope she does. She is the most white trash person you could ever imagine. She has 3 kids by 3 different piece of crap guys. She's always has to be in a relationship at all times. They're in love after 2 weeks. She never wanted kids but she couldn't keep her legs closed. Her last baby daddy got arrested for grand theft. Cops came in to arrest him, said you were peeing in a cup to keep the kids. She refused and refused to get help. She lost custody of her oldest to my nephew's dad. The other 2 went to third baby daddy's sister. My middle niece doesn't even know her sperm donor. She lives with my dad, technically stepdad, but he raised me. She takes extreme advantage of him, ran his truck into ground, uses his disability money. Leaves every weekend to meet up with whatever guy and then shows up Monday back at dad's place. He won't kick her out because he loves her even though she's killing him with stress. He's had 5 heart attacks and open heart surgery before. My mom now has custody of my middle niece. All my niece and nephews have severe behavior health issues and learning disabilities because she refused to be a responsible parent for them. I've stated before and I'll say it again, those kids and my dad will be 1,000,000% better if she just died already. I don't care how, but it's coming soon from either drugs she takes, or meeting up with some psycho who kills her. I'm just waiting for it. I won't feel bad that day at all. My brother and I practiced on each other. Throw away for obvious reasons. My brother and I are under 1 year apart in age. When we were in our early teens, we went through puberty at the same time. I think our hormones led us to some weird places. It didn't go far, but there were multiple occasions of him fondling my breasts, grinding/dry humping me, touching me and myself touching him. We were never fully naked, but sometimes I did have my shirt and bra up. No intercourse. I don't remember how this happened because it just kind of did. We were both single and had never been with another person. Kind of not the cool kids in our social groups. It ended after a short time and I started dating my first boyfriend. I think we definitely suffered from lack of education about how to properly handle our hormones and urges. If I had been taught about masturbation in a healthy manner, or at all, I would have had an outlet for my budding sexual needs. There wasn't physical attraction for me at any point, it was just about the sensation and tabooness of it, I believe. We have never and probably will never speak of this. I have told not one single person. Ever. I do not plan on it. We have a close, normal, sibling relationship now. No weirdness. Also, we do not live in Alabama. I fear I am a monster. I find myself at times thinking of how attractive people would look with their organs laid out on display. I sometimes fantasize about my crush being killed in some horrendous manner. What she'd look like with the blood drained from her. I would never act on these thoughts and I am looking at getting help. But I can't help to think of how even my closest friends would look if they had been butchered. Would their blood be warm? Would their organs look like I'd expect them to? Would I be traumatized at the sight of their skin and muscle flayed away from their bones? Are they all as beautiful inside as they are outside? I fondled a sleeping woman's breasts. When I was 14, I went on a holiday to Italy with my family. On the plane, my mom and my little brothers were sitting in the middle aisle and I was sitting directly across from them. A few hours into the flight, I found myself being one of the few people still awake. My family as well as the people next to me were all asleep. The girl directly next to me, a cute Asian girl in her early 20s, was wearing a tank top and a zip-up jacket and I could see her chest slowly rising and falling as she slept. Once I noticed this, I couldn't focus on anything else. At some point I reached out with 2 fingers and very lightly touched her breast. I did this for a couple of minutes and then I had to go to the restroom to masturbate. When I came back, I tried to go to sleep but I couldn't get what I'd seen out of my mind. I kept opening my eyes and looking down at her bare chest and breasts as they slowly moved up and down. Eventually I started very lightly touching her breasts again. Up to this point I had only been very lightly touching her breasts with 3 fingers, but I plucked up the courage and lightly put my hand under her breast and then lifted it up. Just feeling the weight of her breast in my hand made me have to go back to the bathroom to masturbate again. I was pretty tired when I got back from the bathroom, so I laid back and was able to get to sleep. I would never do anything like that now obviously, but at the time I just couldn't control myself. I've never told anyone about this before. One of the most stupid and embarrassing things I've ever done. I have a fetish I can't escape. I really like pregnant girls. The younger the better, but younger than like 12 is weird. I masturbate to the TV show 16 and Pregnant. I love when the girls put on 50 to 60 pounds during pregnancy and have trouble moving around. I've had these feelings since I was really little. It started by drawing fat girls, then pregnant girls. I didn't know I was feeling an actual sexual attraction until I was older, and that's when I learned what those tinglings down there were. I also like chubby, thick girls. I love watching progression videos of weight gain, not too much but a sizable difference. When tiny girls get really fat for one reason or another, it's so hot to me. Tiny girls with huge pregnant bellies are amazing too, especially when they're moaning because they can't get around so easy anymore. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm ashamed of this. I hate that I ogle so much at these people in public, wishing I could run away and masturbate to them. I feel dirty wanting to get pregnant just so I can be big and huge like them. I'm a girl, by the way. In my 20s and bisexual, if it means anything. I know that there's a baby that's a consequence of getting pregnant, but I've also thought about getting those pills that concentrate body fat to your tummy and just putting on pounds and pounds. I hate feeling like this. I want to stop because it's so embarrassing. I continued the cycle of abuse. I grew up watching one of my parents beat the other to a pulp regularly. The beater would travel a lot for work, and the few months they were home, they would beat the stay-at-home parent every night. Sometimes, they would have sex without realizing or caring that I was in the room. My earliest memory of the beatings is from when I was in 2nd grade. I know what grade I was in only because we moved to a different town just as I was starting 3rd. Otherwise, I cannot remember dates, places, names from my entire childhood to this day. I can identify certain milestones, like when we moved, but even a decade later, I can only remember life as a blur. From the youngest possible age, I began dissociating heavily. The beatings petered out as I got older, but the verbal and emotional abuse continued between them. My home was always in the midst of a storm. I'm pretty certain that the beaten parent is mentally ill as a result of their prolonged trauma. The beaten parent spent most of my teenage years regularly assaulting me, to the point where I am 28 years old and still in the habit of locking the door of any room I am in order to feel safe. Loud banging on doors and raised voices terrify me. At school, I began acting out in strange ways. I was also secretly hypersexual but did not ever have sex. Instead, I watched porn or wrote filthy text on walls. I would also secretly beat 2 young children. They were adorable twin brothers who trusted me and lived next door. I would go on a walk with them, find a secluded spot and mercilessly slap them while forbidding them from crying. After continuing this monstrous behavior for some time, no idea how long because I truly cannot sense time. It was possibly before high school because we'd moved again when I was in high school. Their mother showed up at my house and said that the twins were at home with a high fever, refusing to leave the house because of me. I denied having anything to do with their issues. The guilt drove me insane for years and years. I tried contacting them to apologize, but I couldn't find them online anywhere. I am now diagnosed with a severe mental disorder and can barely complete daily tasks like shower, clean the house or earn a living. I accept money from the beater parent to get by when I can't afford rent. The beater parent is rich. My parents, inexplicably, have strong relationship now. Somehow, with my noticing, everyone at home mellowed down and figured everything out. No one talks about any of it, and no one cares what their twisted relationship has done to my brain. My older sibling somehow got away from it all, having left home right after high school, and has become a very successful, well-adjusted, balanced and stunningly brilliant doctor. We barely talk, and this breaks my heart worse than anything else. Domestic violence destroys more lives than you'd expect. I did nothing to deserve my mental illness except be born into this family. The twins did nothing to deserve my evilness except live near the despicable, poisonous person I was. I was a monster to them, the kind of person I was sure I would never be. I have never again hurt someone, ever. But nothing undoes the past. I wonder if there's other people here who can relate to parts of my story. A pedophile took my virginity and no one knows about it. About 3 years ago, when I was 12, I met an older girl online through our mutual love for role-playing. She was 19. We spent a lot of time together because of the interests we shared, which meant I was on my phone texting her 24/7. She was the first person I talked to in the morning and the last one at night. Not only because we had fun talking, but also because of her serious mental issues that she dumped onto me, basically making me responsible for stopping her when she wanted to take her own life about every other day. Needless to say, this obsession affected my grades and relationships with my family and friends, as well as my mindset on life. I stayed with her because I thought I loved her and actually cared for her. I didn't. I just wanted her to be alive and healthy, and I didn't want to feel responsible in case she actually did die. I asked her to be my girlfriend, which seemed like a good decision at the time. Now when I think about it, I'm pretty sure she wanted to make everything about herself and I just went along with it because I'm a people pleaser. After a year of constantly talking and exchanging inappropriate photos, she visited my country and popped my flower with a toy, something I thought I wanted. We even had plans of me running away from home to live with her. I can't thank the stars enough for not actually going through with that ridiculous plan. Another plan that we had that still haunts me to this day was that she gave me a lot of her antidepressant pills and told me to poison my own mother, because she yelled at me from time to time and was thus considered evil. And the worst part? I actually did it. Once again, I can't thank enough any god that's up there that nothing actually happened to her. Eventually, I broke up every connection I had to her. To this day, I'm not sure whether I actually wanted to be with her or if she just used me, because none of the usual red flags popped up. No one knows, and so I can't talk to anyone about it. I don't know whether to go to therapy, because the therapist might tell my parents that I don't want that, or keep it inside or vent my feelings out in other ways. Either way, I can't seem to make peace with it, no matter how much time passes. I'm lost and I don't know who to blame. I had an affair with my father and it ruined my life. Almost 3 years ago, I came out of the closet to my parents on my 18th birthday. After that, my dad started treating me a lot differently than he had before. He was more loving and tender with me. He used a lot of pet names and showered me with hugs and I love yous all the time. I really started to fall in love with him and had some strong sexual feelings about it. He would hold me close while we watched TV or ask me to join him in his room while my mom was at work, and he became my whole world. Eventually we started having sex and I thought we'd be together forever. Things were rocky at first and then they got better. But I started missing the things that other couples had, like PDAs and dates. Everything was a secret because A. He's still married to my mom. I didn't want to hurt her and neither did he. B. He's not openly bi or gay and didn't want to be out of the closet. C. He's my dad and was scared it would ruin both of our lives if anyone ever found out. Eventually my mom figured out what was going on, but she didn't seem to be upset with me. But once I found out she knew, there was no way I could face her or keep it up. It was the hardest thing for me to do, but I decided to end it with my dad. It hurt so much, but there wasn't anyone for me to talk to. It's not like I could confide in anyone or even go see a counselor. So I just cried myself to sleep every night instead while my mom and dad acted like nothing was wrong. I'm about to turn 21 and I feel like everything's a mess. I'm way behind in my courses and haven't even gotten an associate's degree yet. I'm too broke to move out because my dad said I could either work or go to college, but he didn't want me taking on too much. They aren't mean to me, but it just hurts to see him sitting on the couch with her when I know I can't sit with him either. I'd do anything just to feel his arms around me or hear him call me babe again. I'm having a tough time right now and just need to get this off my chest. I hope everyone isn't too disgusted by it. I know it's gross. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more sick videos. Click the right box for the Confessions playlist. Let us know in the comments what you think about these stories. I sabotaged my father's marriage because he cheated on my mother. 8 stories of r/confession. I punched a girl in the face for kicking me in the balls. I was 16, at school, hanging out with my friends, and a couple of people that were not so much my friends. A couple of girls had a habit of kicking guys in the balls over BS, smallest disagreements, mutual insult throwing, or even for fun. I had warned them before, that I would someday do something they ain't gonna like, if they kept it up. Of course they had to put that to the test. Gotta see just how much you can abuse people, before you give it up. So we were standing in a circle, apparently I said something she disagreed with. Wasn't even an insult or anything. She feints to kick me in the balls. I tell her again, if she does that, something's gonna happen. She apparently takes it as a challenge, gives me the hardest kick in the balls I ever received. I collapse, feel like dying, puking, crapping my pants, can't breathe, absolute agony. Some of my friends are concerned, scold her, some buttholes, including her, are laughing their butts off, while I'm trying not to break into tears. I stand up 5 minutes later, feeling worthless, she's still laughing. I get the greatest rush of anger and emotional pain pent up over 2 years of those a-holes kicking me and other guys, including some of my friends, in the balls like we're less than dogs, and before I can think, my fist catapults itself into her ugly, laughing face. She collapses with blood streaming from her nose, wailing like a baby, as if she didn't like being put in so much pain that she collapses. Weird. Her like-minded friends look like they've seen a ghost, start screaming insults at me in sheer disbelief, and even though I was suspended for 2 weeks, and she got no punishment whatsoever, this was the most satisfying, liberating thing I've ever done, and I regret nothing. Got a reputation as a woman beater among some classmates, As if I randomly attack gentle, harmless girls, who actually deserve being protected, for the fun of it, but my friends stayed by my side, and no more balls were kicked after that. Would do again, don't give a crap that she doesn't have balls. I slept with my daughter's ex-boyfriend, he got me pregnant and I had an abortion. They got back together and got married. This was back in, let me think, maybe 1997? I was 38 and my daughter was 18, and she was dating Harry, who was 24. I was an alcoholic and dabbled in other drugs, mostly cocaine. I was not a good person, let alone mother. Not like I was abusive to my daughter or anything, but I was generally inattentive and cared more about my alcohol and drugs than her, especially in her teen years. I am 14 years sober now. I disapproved of my daughter dating Harry, but I never told her why. He would flirt with me, constantly, and the age difference also creeped me out. Also, he was an alcoholic and drug user, just like me. She broke up with him over his alcoholism. Soon after she moved away, not too far, but regardless she didn't live with me anymore. Harry kept calling me and asking if we wanted to get drinks. I turned him down, but then one day he said he had a bunch of coke and I couldn't resist. He came over, we did the coke, and we ended up having sex. He was a very good-looking guy. He looked a lot like that ridiculous 80s Justin Bieber picture that was on the front page today. That is actually what made me think about him. For the next few months, maybe like 3 to 4 months, he would sometimes come over and we would have sex and do drugs and get drunk together. Any drug addict knows what that is like to have a drug addict buddy in that way. Then I got pregnant. I knew it was by him. I had sex without a condom a few times stupidly. I never told him I was pregnant, and I went and got the abortion and kept it a secret. Anyways, I stopped seeing him after that. It was too weird. I also got sober, for like 4 months, before relapsing. Fast forward 2 years and my daughter contacts me and tells me that she got back with Harry, and that he is fully sober. I was mortified honestly. He was gonna tell her that we slept together, and she is going to hate me for life. They came over one day and said hi, and when my daughter was gone, Harry told me that there is no reason to tell her about what happened. I agreed. It's been 16 years of marriage on their part. They have a kid together. Harry got cancer, then beat it. I got sober. That's basically it. I don't see them very often. They live in Texas and I live on the East Coast. But whenever I go there is always that tension between me and Harry. It's literally the first thing that comes to either of our minds, I can just tell. Not like sexual tension, like why did we have to do that? What the hell is wrong with us? Kind of tension. I think about this often. Especially when I see my grandson. I always think that could have been my son if things had gone differently, but wow, what a disaster that would have been if I decided to keep that child. I killed an elderly man in front of his wife and basically his entire family. I haven't talked about this to anyone, even though it's been years, even my closest of friends, minus the ones that were there. One night when I was in college I was driving to get some liquor for a party my fraternity was supposed to throw the following night. I was taking a street I was very familiar with to get back to my house. It was dark but the street was lit with street lamps. I remember that I looked at my radio for a second, just a second, not very long at all. But when I looked back up to the road there was a man crossing. I didn't have any time to react. By the time I saw him he had already hit the hood of my car and bounced off the side. I remember screaming and hitting the brakes, and the wash of horror of what had just happened. I'll admit I had thought about speeding away, but I pulled over to the side and ran out of my car to check on this guy. When I got to him, his family was standing outside the restaurant he was leaving and they were all screaming and crying. He was laying on the side of the road with blood coming out his nose and mouth. 2 other men were standing with him trying to see if he was alright and calling 911. All I could say was I didn't see him. I was frantic by the time it had set in what I had done. I sat on the curb across from the family and listened to their crying in agony while we waited for the paramedics to arrive. I sat there and sobbed while 2 paramedics took him away in an ambulance. I don't believe I've ever cried so hard and for so long. The worst part about all of it and what still kills me today was that his wife came over to me while I was distraught on that curb, sat next to me, placed her hand on my shoulder and said I was married to him for almost 50 years. We had a good life. Then she hugged me and said that she forgave me. After everything was said and done it was ruled that it was an accident. I wasn't charged with anything and I had one of my friends pick me up from the police station. I went down a dark path the years after that. I drank heavily, dropped out of college in my senior year, and had to move back in with my mother and father because I couldn't hold on to a job. Even tried to kill myself with pills. It was a hard road to recovery, which I feel I am not fully recovered from, nor do I feel I ever will be the same. But eventually I got my life back in order. Joined up with the Navy and saw a bit of the world, and now I'm on track to go back to college and hopefully finish what I started there. It took almost a decade, but I finally start to feel almost whole again. I'm back to hanging with my friends, and actually going out. So maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I got a girl deported because we got into an argument. Years ago I was browsing Facebook one day and I saw a girl I went to high school with arguing with some other people. I was browsing through the comments and noticed they were all using some really incorrect terms and had some really bad misconceptions about the topic. I wanted to hop in there really quickly and just clarify the terms they were using and show them what terms they should be using so we could have an informed debate. She got so mad at me and told me that I was trying to discredit her and make her look stupid. She made a Facebook status about me in a long rant and was making some pretty hurtful claims. She then blocked me so that I couldn't respond to the claims. I made a fake account and added her as a friend again and found an old status that she made about how her parents illegally brought her over the border as a child. I submitted the photo of her status to a few government agencies and then finished out the school year and forgot about it. She never came back from summer break and some of her close friends mentioned that she had been deported with her family. I regret doing that because she couldn't speak Spanish because her parents wanted her to live here and truly be an English-speaking American, and now she is in a country that she doesn't know and she can speak the language well or at all. I make copies of other people's keys for personal use. Whenever anyone lets me borrow a key, usually to their house in order to pets it, the first thing I do is go to Walmart and make a copy of that key for personal use after they ask for it back. I never break into houses and steal anything, other than food or maybe alcohol. But I love the feeling of being able to effortlessly enter a place I know I don't belong without anyone's knowledge. I have keys to multiple people's houses and a couple of buildings/garages from my old job. I lie about having my university degree and it got me a great job. I went to an Ivy League university in Ontario, Canada right after high school. My marks weren't great, but they were good enough to squeeze me in. I spent most of my time in university partying rather than studying, but still managed to pass all of my first-year classes. In my second year I skipped a lot of classes and was very lazy with the coursework. My marks were terrible and I failed a couple of my courses. In my third year, about halfway through, I dropped out and got a job landscaping. I did that for a year when I realized it really sucked and I began to regret not trying harder while I was in school. I figured I would apply to jobs that would normally require the degree that I would have gotten. I had spent the few years in school. I was easy enough to make the timeline on my resume make sense, and although I dropped out I had a decent knowledge of the area. The field I was attempting to enter is difficult start out and it took a few months of sending applications to get an interview. The company I got an interview with, my now current employer, is an internationally recognized name in the energy sector. I was extremely surprised to get my interview. One of the documentation requirements was university transcripts, and with an hour or two in Photoshop I had my proof of graduation. I sent in the papers with the other required information and never heard anything back describing any problems with my records. I ended up going through 3 interviews in the process and received a position. I have now been working with this company for almost 5 years. They provided all the necessary job training and nobody has ever questioned my education. I entered with a starting salary of $72,500 CDN, and received annual raises. Upon hiring me I was told that the management staff was quite impressed with me through the hiring process and that they usually only hire applicants with minimum requirement of a master's degree. I basically pooped my pants every day while in the interview and training process, but now I don't really think about it ever. I didn't tell my university friends I faked having my degree. The only people that know I did this are my parents. I sabotaged my father's marriage because he cheated on my mother. When I was 4 years old my father and mother divorced because he cheated on her. They had a really rough divorce and had lots of fights. Eventually the divorce was settled and my mother and father could move on. My father married his mistress, who I'll call Emily as to respect her privacy. My father was really happy with her, and me and my sister got a stepbrother and 2 stepsisters with whom we got along really well. Skip forward 2 years and Emily started acting different, and so was my father. Me and my sister often couldn't visit our father because he had to work, whilst in reality he was free. When me and my sister were there we often weren't allowed to eat at the table, which 7-year-old me didn't understand. Eventually my father started becoming more distant. He didn't wish me happy birthday anymore and missed a lot of important milestones in my childhood, like learning to ride my bike or plays at school. When I was 9, my sister and I could only visit 4 days a month and had to sleep in separate rooms. I vividly remember that during one weekend that we were there I had accidentally broken a glass and Emily had turned furious. She sent me upstairs and had me take my socks, of which 9-year-old me found really weird. Then she showed me a piece of glass she held in her hand and said that this is what I deserved for my clumsiness. She pushed the shard of glass into the sole of my foot. I yelled and cried and tried to remove my leg from her grasp when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my father's hand. He was helping Emily do this. I don't remember what happened after that. Emily also got into a huge fight with my sister and had pulled her by her hair down to the basement. After these 2 occasions and a lot of verbal abuse, we decided to break all contact and tell our mother what had happened. We hadn't told her before because, well, he was our father. My mother knew this was serious abuse, but she was too afraid to alert the police since my father had threatened her with violence before. Skip forward another 5 years. I was 14 and a freshman at the same school my former step-siblings attended. Once I saw them, all the memories started rising again. My 2 step-sisters had become huge bullies and lots of people hated them. Me and a couple of friends decided to retaliate and secretly put small bags of marijuana in their backpacks. Apparently this had caused a huge fight in their home and my father and Emily decided to divorce. After this, Emily got into serious financial troubles and my father became an alcoholic. 2 weeks ago he was arrested for assault. Emily has allegedly become a prostitute and my former step-siblings have been brought into protected custody. This has all been my fault. It was my idea to put the marijuana in their bags, even though they hadn't done anything to me. I ruined the lives of my step-siblings and sent my stepmother and father into a downward spiral. Yet in some sick way I don't feel any remorse. My sister has been dealing with a severe eating disorder after all the verbal abuse from Emily and has been hospitalized twice. I've tried once to commit suicide because of my sexual orientation since I thought I was an abomination after Emily's conservative Christian rants. Now me and my sister are doing better, though we still have traumas. We've thought about starting a lawsuit, but because of our ages during the incidents, legal advisors have advised us to just move on. Anyway, I'm in a real moral dilemma. I did something that caused horrible things, yet I don't feel any remorse. Am I a psychopath? I mercilessly bullied 5 people in high school. 3/5 of them killed themselves. I am in my 40s now, and I don't deserve the life I have. I stepped on the backs of my classmates to make myself feel better about myself. I was bullied harshly in school, and had the crap beat out of me on a daily basis until I hit puberty. Then I suddenly grew into a monster. I towered over everybody at school. I also channeled my anger into working out, and became even bigger. I was a huge ogre of a person. I hated everybody. I had so much angst built up from my own bullying. My former bullies, being the manipulative cowards that they were, I see this in retrospect, but didn't see it at the time, befriended me. And we pretty much held a reign of terror over the school. I fed on the newfound respect from my former enemies. We preyed on the weak. There were about 5 nerds that I personally tormented harshly. I joined Facebook a couple months ago to see what became of them. I had hopes that they were able to live happy lives despite my awful treatment of them. One I knew died suspiciously in high school, but it turns out it was a suicide that was covered up. 2 more killed themselves right after high school graduation. The 4th lives alone in a trailer and appears to be crazy. The 5th person actually turned their life around and married the head cheerleader several years after graduation. So at least there's that. I wish I could apologize to the remaining 2, but it would be so trite and meaningless. Plus, it would probably re-traumatize them, having to see me again. Or having to think about those events again. I suck, I'm sorry, and sometimes I feel like I should off myself too. You know, to balance the scales of life. I have been tormented my entire adult life for being the bully that I was, when I really should have been an advocate for the bullied instead. I mean, I already knew how it felt. Instead of sticking up for people and beating the bullies' butts, I, like a weakling, joined them. I can never forgive myself for that. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Find all confessions linked in the video description. If you are new to the channel and like these kind of videos, you might want to consider a subscription. Anyway, let us know which of the stories has shocked you most. And leave a like if you enjoyed the video. I told my mom to just die already while she was sick with cancer. 6 Reddit confessions from r/confession. I kicked my son out of our house for being gay. He became an alcoholic and nearly drank himself to death. This was in 1991. My son was 18 and going to a local college. Me and my wife considered ourselves sort of a normal New Jersey Italian Catholic family. We were traditional and fairly ignorant to most things. We hated the perceived feminization of culture. Images of drag queens in NYC and AIDS and the tight pants of modern kids made us recoil in horror. My wife found gay porn magazines in my son's room. I came home to her being angry. She was freaking out at him. I asked why and she showed me what it was. I felt my heart drop down into my stomach. It was like a punch to the gut. He was gay? It felt like the ultimate betrayal to us, betraying our religion, betraying the normal, healthy upbringing we gave him. We had zero concept of the idea of being born gay. We thought it was something you made a choice to engage in, and once you did it you couldn't stop. Everything that we had given him, a normal, religious, traditional home, with enough money to go to college and relative freedom to do what he wants, and he just threw it all away. At least, that is what I thought at the time. He was my only precious thing in the world, my son, the person who would inherit my family's name, the man who I raised from a child to be a man, but at that moment was the furthest thing from a real man in my mind I could imagine. I made the choice right then and there that he was no son of mine, he was just a sissy who happened to live in my house. I know how horrific this sounds, because it was horrific. And it was how almost everyone who lived in our community felt. We were constantly spewed with propaganda to hate gay people and ideas that the youth were all gay and experimenting and getting AIDS and dressing as women. The hair metal, men wearing makeup, David Bowie, the drag queens in New York across the Hudson, Freddie Mercury, the ridiculous clothing of the era, it all gave the worldview that the world was turning into some gay, womanly wonderland. Anyways, I barely even spoke to him. My wife was the one who did all the yelling. I just went red in the face and couldn't even look at him. She told him to get the hell out and go to New York to live with his friends, who she assumed were all gay, and she was right, mostly. She physically hit him, a lot, and got him to pack his stuff while he was crying and told him to get out. Me and my wife were just devastated afterwards. We went to church a lot. My wife told all the other families in the area and they were horrified at my son. I remember when we told our priest, who was a very nice, accepting man, about our son, he looked to be disgusted, but when we told him we kicked him out he looked at us in disgust, or at least hid it a tiny bit. Living without my son hurt. It also made me rethink things over time. I still saw him almost as an inhuman person. To be gay, to me at that time, was so sinful and horrific that it was impossible to truly consider accepting them as real, normal people. Me and my wife grew apart in the 6 months following my son leaving. She started to drink a lot, and she was a nasty drunk. She had a history of alcoholism. I knew how bad it could get. This was the worst I had ever seen her. We fought constantly over stupid things, and all I could think about was that when our son was here, we never fought, he always calmed us down. In the end, I got kicked out of my own home. She just told me to leave. I moved to New York to live with my brother in Bay Ridge. We got divorced officially a few months later. She would die from liver failure 7 years later. I made the choice, a conscious choice, to find out where my son was. At that point my life was just in shambles and I was rethinking everything about how I viewed my religion, my life, and I was just so horribly depressed and lonely. Finding him was a nightmare of itself. It took 2 weeks of calling homeless shelters and asking around at them if they had seen my son months ago. I finally found him in an apartment in Williamsburg. I saw him and apologized, and I told him that I am so sorry I kicked him out. Part of me was still in the same mindset as before. I was still a raging homophobe, but I tried to push that part away and just be with my son and ignore everything else. He was a severe alcoholic. My first thought when I saw him, sweaty and skinny and sickly looking, was AIDS. But no, it was alcoholism. It runs in the family. He said that it started soon after I kicked him out, and that he was horribly depressed and turned to drinking heavily. Even his roommates said it was a major problem. For the next 3 months I spent a lot of time focusing on getting him clean. I met his friends, about half of whom were gay, and we worked together to help him. He went to a detox clinic, he went to rehab. We spent a lot of emotional days together. I didn't want to lose him, even though just a year before I was desperate to get rid of him. The thought of him dying, right after this, because we kicked him out, it was just too much to bear. I made the decision that if he died, I would probably commit suicide after. But he would get clean, then relapse 4 months later, then get clean again for 2 years, then relapse again. Then he quickly recovered. And he would never touch another drop again. Spending the time with my son, and seeing how he lived, and more importantly actually seeing how these gay men lived their lives, mostly completely normally, it completely changed me as a human being. In 1996, I went to my first Pride Parade with my son to support him and his boyfriend at the time. I took a heavy interest in the LGBT community and went with my son to visit his friends in AIDS clinics. If you were to have told me in 1991 that I would be going to an AIDS clinic with a drag queen and being friendly with everyone by 1997, I wouldn't believe you in the slightest. Anyways, this post has been days in the making. I love Reddit even if I am a bit old for it, haha. I have told my story before to a journalist and it was published. If you feel deja vu reading this, I would very much prefer if you didn't reveal my identity on this post or post the article. I used to bully my disabled brother for years. I know this will get a lot of hate, and yes, I deserve it. I am not looking for any validation or forgiveness. I know I am a piece of human trash. I just need to get this out. I have a brother who is 2 years older than me. He has suffered from a condition since birth that forces him to be in a wheelchair anytime he is out of bed. He cannot use his arms that well either. We used to have a great relationship until I turned 11 and I really started resenting the amount of attention he took from my parents. And how much stress he put them under. I had to constantly help him, change him, feed him. I hated it. There was a few years in his life when he's so mean to my parents and it really made me resent him more. I realize now that I had no right to judge him and I will never know how difficult life is for him. I stopped hanging out with him and made more friends at school. I would tell my family all the fun I was having at school during dinner to make him feel bad. I started barely talking to him or acknowledge his presence. He would get frustrated to the point of tears to get my attention. It started escalating 2 years ago, when I would purposely turn off the Wi-Fi and unplug the TV every time we had to leave the house so my brother could do nothing but sit in his wheelchair. I would purposely delete his favorite saved shows on the DVR. I would make fun of his speech. Push things just out of his reach. I would act disgusted when I had to change or bathe him. It always made him feel bad and he would apologize. I made my own brother apologize for taking a dump. What the hell is wrong with me? But my saint of a brother never told my parents. And he never let me have it. 3 weeks ago, he was trying to talk to me non-stop and I was just ignoring him. I got annoyed and wheeled him against his wishes to the backyard and placed him under an umbrella and went back inside. I fell asleep and realized I left him out there for 3 hours. When I went to bring him back inside he was in tears and wouldn't look at me. He was humiliated. I have always felt guilty about how I treated my brother all these years, but my anger towards him overpowered it. But seeing that look on his face affected me in a way that was different from before. I stopped all the bullying after that day. I couldn't even look him in the face, I was so ashamed. Last Sunday my brother told me he was glad I was his brother and friend. I couldn't even respond. I went to my room and cried. I'm crying again typing this all out. When did I become an evil trash human being? Hell. I'm 17 and he's 19 now. I know there is nothing I can do to make up for the past 6 years. My brother will be returning with my mom from a specialist appointment tonight. I'm going to apologize to him and beg for his forgiveness tonight. I want to start being a decent brother to him again. I am a healthy guy with no issues who chose to bully his only brother for something that wasn't even his fault. I am so ashamed of myself. My son beat up another boy and I'm so proud of him. So my son was being bullied pretty badly at school. People would make fun of his accent, use racial slurs towards him, throw open milk cartons at him at lunch, start rumors about him. They put his book bag in the toilet once, and a bunch of messed up things kids do to each other. My son had told on the main perpetrator to me, and his mother and I went to the school and told them about my concerns, and the school gave him a stern talking to which only stopped him for a few weeks, and then he continued to bully my son. So I went to the school and complained again, and the administration had told me that they spoke to the kid and he had told them that he was just joking and he didn't mean any of the stuff he was saying and that they were actually friends. Anyway, the assistant principal told me that boys will be boys and that it was not out of the ordinary for boys to make fun of each other. But since the kid had admitted to doing it, they gave him in-school suspension, which is essentially a slap on the wrist. So after that I realized that nothing was going to happen if I kept running back to the administration every time my son came home crying. So I took matters into my own hands. Now I am going to tell you something about me. In my home country I was an amateur boxer, but due to the financial situation I was in, my mother did not want me to box. She wanted me to work and study, so I cut a deal with her. If I made that to the Olympics I would go pro after, but if I failed, I would stop and work and go to university. Anyway, I failed and stopped boxing and got a job and finished my studies. Okay, so what I did was teaching my son how to fight. Every day after I get home from work for the past 9 months, I take him to the local boxing gym and taught him how to hit the bag, throw combinations, taught him about footwork and movement, how to work the speed bag, how to dodge, hit the pads and everything else I knew from my old days as a boxer. It worked wonders for my son. Not only did he become physically stronger, he also became mentally strong. He stopped coming home crying. He started to make friends and it had a real positive effect on him. When I would ask him if he was still getting bullied, he said it didn't bother him what people he didn't care about said about him, so I figured that was the end of the bully problem. I was wrong. 2 weeks ago I get a call from school that my son had gotten into a fight and that I had to go pick him up because he and the other boy were both suspended for 5 days for fighting. When I go to pick my son up, he is covered in blood, which was alarming at first, but then he told me that it was not his blood, it was the other boy. The one who put his bag in the toilet kept walking up to him and using racial insults towards him, and my son told him if he didn't stop he was going to beat him up, and he kept his promise. Turns out my son broke the other kid's nose, busted his lip and hit the other kid's eye and it had swollen shut. My son has some bruises on his face but nothing compared to the other kid. Now my son has been getting yelled at a lot by his mother. She made him write an apology letter to the boy's parents, to the principal, to the teacher, to the security guard who broke it up, and she is really mad at me and blames me for this because I taught him how to fight, but I honestly could not be more proud of him. He's getting whatever he wants for Christmas from me. I'm purposely trying not to get my wife pregnant. I'm in my later 20s. My wife is still in her early 20s. We currently have no kids, 2 dogs and have been married for only 7 months. My initial plan was to be married for 2 years and get established in our jobs, which are fairly new, then start trying for kids. I really do want them and I've expressed my concern to her, but she doesn't want to hear any of it. This person got pregnant. This person is due anytime, her friends from high school/college are having kids, etc. She wants a baby. We dated for a total of 3 years before we got married. The first 2 were a sex-filled romp. My wife is a freak in bed and she sure showed it. After we got engaged, it slowed down a bit and she wasn't as freaky, but it was still satisfying. Now that we're married, she doesn't want anything intimate unless we are trying. If I say, hey, wanna have sex, or even attempt foreplay, she brushes me off. But if I say, hey, let's make a baby, she turns back into freak mode. My wife is one of those that thought if a guy ejaculates inside a woman, she will become pregnant no matter what. She didn't realize about ovulation and peak times and whatnot. So, after she learned about it, she asked me to download the Flow app and chart her cycles for her. I did, but manipulated the whole thing. When she thinks she's ovulating, she's not, and the chances of her getting pregnant are slim to none. Sometimes I'll tell her that her peak day highest chance of getting pregnant is coming up in a few days, so we should start early. We have crazy sex for 3 to 4 days in a row and then nothing while she's actually ovulating. I'm a bad person. I will eventually give her a baby. Just not anytime soon. I kicked a kid in his balls and he had to have one removed. This happened when I was around 7 or 8 years old. It was my first year in primary school and I had joined the school with some of my friends from the local feeder school in the area. One particular boy was a year older than us and was repeating the first year for some reason. He was of German descent, from a very well-to-do family and a lot bigger than the rest of us. Possibly because he was embarrassed at repeating the year, he was a bit of a bully. He often picked on me and some of my friends. I'm sure we probably escalated things at times too because I know he was teased for being German. So one day, standing outside class, I kicked him full whack in the balls. He buckled over, but I can't really remember much of what happened afterwards. We probably tucked tail and ran. I can't even say for sure whether he deserved to be kicked at the time or if I just thought I was getting him back for previous behavior. Anyway, he missed school for a few days after and I heard some kids saying he was in hospital. Soon after that I was called in to speak to a teacher who, as far as I remember, dressed me down and explained he had gone home and his testicle has swollen up to the size of a tennis ball and it had to be removed. I don't really remember getting into much trouble about it, but I do remember some of the other kids going on about it in banter. The details are hazy, but I felt so bad and I felt I was in so much trouble that I never ever told my parents about it. This was made worse as my dad and his dad had gone to school together. Only found this out after seeing my dad chatting to his dad at a rugby match that me and the kid were playing one Saturday about a year after. I was freaking out the whole time they were speaking and then started feeling guilty that my dad might have been seen as rude by his dad for not apologizing for my action. It didn't come across that way, as they seemed like old friends catching up, but I felt so guilty. I felt so awful about it. I mean, at the time I didn't realize that it may have an effect on him being able to have children, but I felt like I'd done something so horrible and always expected my family to confront me about it. When I learned of the reproductive challenge this might cause, the guilt was just amplified. The years that followed in primary school were mostly fine. On the odd occasion he would have a go at me. I remember him having a slightly shorter fuse with me than others, but I think he ended up being okay and less of a bully. Saying that, he did try drown me in a river at our primary school leavers camp as I'd pissed him off for some reason, but mostly the in-between years went by without incident. I left that school to go to a different high school, so I never maintained contact with him. I saw him once during my teenage years and we chatted for about 5 minutes. I remember it being friendly. I never, ever mentioned it. I hope he was able to have children. I'm sorry, bro. I'm sorry I never said sorry too. I told my mom to just die already while she was sick with cancer. I felt like this is the best place to confess this guilt that has been a part of me for the last 10 years. My sweet mother passed away when I was 9 years old. During her gruesome battle with ovarian cancer, I got frustrated seeing her rapidly deteriorate. I just said what came to my childish mind: I wish you would just die already. Her response is what continues to ache my soul. She looked at me without words and began quietly sobbing. 9-year-old me couldn't comprehend the situation, so I left her to cry and walked away with guilt. We never spoke about it, and she passed away months after that happened. I wasn't a bad child, I just wasn't prepared to handle seeing my mother suffer the way she did, and it made me frustrated. Rest in peace, Mama, you cross my mind every day. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more videos like this. Let me know if the last story hit you as hard as it hit me. And share your thoughts about these confessions in the comments below. My favorite thing working as a window washer was going through people's private possessions. 6 creepy confessions from r/confessions. 2 creepy guys that go through people's stuff when they are not at home. A child psychopath who hurt his younger cousin, and a nurse who got her best friend fired. My favorite thing working as a window washer was going through people's private possessions. So I worked as a window washer in my small town in Sweden for about 5 years. Every morning you went to the warehouse where we had all of our stuff, drank a cup of coffee with your coworkers and talked for a bit before getting to know the places you had to go to that day, and who you had to do them with. Our bosses were very keen on everyone getting to know everyone, so they changed up the teams every day. This meant sometimes you got to go out by yourself. A typical workday is going to 4 to 5 houses or apartments, sometimes old people, they were always home, sometimes families who were home because they knew we were coming. Not very often, you got people who left their key under the mat and let us go inside without them being home. I liked this the most, since you didn't have anyone breathing down your neck while you worked. And sometimes, once in a blue moon, you got a house, with nobody home, by yourself. I don't know if there's something wrong with me, maybe. But to me it felt like I had struck gold, because I knew I would be able to walk around that house, by myself, checking out every inch of it. I usually started by doing my job super fast. Make sure I had some way of knowing if they got home. Usually I placed a ladder somewhere close to the door so if someone came home they had to move it. Then I got to work. I never looked to steal anything, it was pure curiosity. I looked through bathroom cabinets, nightstands, desk drawers and basically anything that you could open, while making sure everything I touched was placed back exactly where it was before. During my years I've found diaries with dark secrets, cute secrets and just downright weird secrets. I've found used condoms in the teenage boys' room, dildos and vibrators in the daughter's or mother's nightstands. I found a gun under a mattress, which in Sweden is not something you see every day. One couple had a sex swing hanging in the bedroom, so it's not really something I needed to look for, but I thought it was strange that they didn't take it down when they knew people were going to be in the house. I once opened a teenager's MacBook, and boom, Pornhub, paused mid-video. No password. No incognito window, nothing. Jewelry, expensive watches and knives. One kid had a 3-knife welded together like a ninja star but with a handle. Like I said, never stole anything. That wasn't my goal. I just loved going through other people's stuff. It's wrong. I know that. But I couldn't help myself. I used to go into random homes in my neighborhood when the occupants weren't home. This was in the mid-80s when security wasn't like it is now, and also, lots of families didn't even lock their doors. The first time I ever did this was when I was riding my bike in the neighborhood and saw a front door of a home wide open. I peeked in and said hello just to see if someone was home. No one answered. I stood in the living room just scanning the area and got spooked and left. After that day, I was hooked on it. I would wait for people to leave and enter through whichever door or window was open and would walk around. I never stole anything, but I did open drawers, closets, and went through personal belongings. I once found a wad of money rolled in up a sock. I took the money and sock and put it in the next drawer over. I felt like I needed to leave a mark, so I ended up moving dishes and cabinets. Like, I switched the cups with plates and moved utensil drawers to another spot in the kitchen. I did this in about 8 or 9 homes until people started talking and getting suspicious, and of course, people started locking their doors, including our family. I stopped after that. Someone did call the police, but nothing ever came of it since nothing was stolen. I haven't trespassed in anyone's home, but I do switch things around in other homes when I'm invited over. I abused my cousin for most of our childhood. I am not sure how exactly to start this thing. He was between the ages of 7 to 13. I was 3 years older. We would always play video games on my console together. I was very conceited and selfish and narcissistic back then, and every time he beat me at a video game I'd go crazy on him. We had a wired controller and I would always unplug it and just sling it everywhere on his body. He'd scream sorry and stuff and beg me to stop. I'd keep doing it. Every single time. This lasted for years. I was a bad child. Always complaining, always making things about me, always being a cunt to my cousins when they did nothing to deserve it, and actually always were nice to me. For years this went on with him. He still came over, still played games with me, still spoke as if we were friends, and none of that ever happened. When he was about 8, we decided to go outside. We were at my house, and we had a trampoline in the front yard. We always jumped on it for fun and stuff, and being the bad person I was, I devised a plan. I found that there were a bunch of rocks underneath the trampoline, and told my cousin to check underneath and look at one that happened to be right in the center of the trampoline. I told him to stay put and keep staring, while I hopped up and positioned myself. I centered myself on his head. And I jumped. The full force of my weight just came crashing down on him and his head. He hit the ground hard. All I heard was a thud, and then a pained scream. Everybody in the house came running toward him, and I got scared. Not even for his sake, the only thing I was scared of was the idea of getting in trouble. I pulled him out from underneath and pretended to care about his well-being, when in reality I wanted this to all seem like an accident. I don't know everything else that happened after that. It all went by really fast. A year after that, the abuse and everything finally stopped. He still came over and we still played games together. I remained calm this time, still getting slightly irritated but still managed. And by the time I turned 16 I remembered everything I did to him. It all came flooding back. I felt guilty, disgusted. I still do. I don't think I will ever not feel bad about it. I don't know why I was the way I was, and I can't make a single excuse for it. I was a horrible human being back then. Child or not, that is no excuse. I'm never going to let myself live this down. I only married my wife to get out of my parents' house. 20 years ago I married my wife. I was only 21 years old and only knew her for a few months. It was arranged. I have 7 other siblings and couldn't stand living in that house anymore. No privacy, having to give money to my parents. I was sick and tired of it all. We are Middle Eastern and I told my mom I was moving out. She said the only way I could move out was if I got married because people in our culture just don't move out. So I asked this pretty Arabian girl I knew if she would marry me. We knew each other for a few months. She said yes. I didn't want to marry her, but I needed to desperately get away as I couldn't take it anymore. We struggled pretty badly and lived in a raggedy apartment that had a rat problem and we had to share a bad car. I don't regret it. I love my wife as much as someone who knew them for 10 years prior would. I pretend to be interested in middle-aged women during interviews and on the job. I noticed when I got in shape and dressed nicer the older women began treating me much better at the office. Every interview I've gone on so far where the interviewer was a woman resulted in me being offered a job. I now purposely lock eyes with women during interviews because it makes them feel attractive even if they're not. I don't care about them and I continue this behavior even after getting the job. What I learned is women aren't really that different from men when in a position of authority. They like being around attractive people and will render undeserved preferential treatment. I've had married female attorneys, admin assistants look for excuses to touch me, and I encourage this behavior because I end up in higher paying positions or cushier environments when I do. I'm aware this treatment will decline as I age, but I'll capitalize on it as long as I can. I ended my ex-best friend's career, ruining her life. This was a few years ago. I used to be friends with this girl in college, we'll call her Jackie, and we're both pursuing our nursing degrees. We got along really well for a majority of the school year except towards the end. I began liking a boy, who she knew about, and then had sex with him anyway. We both talked about it and she understood how hurt I was and promised never to do something like that again. Fast forward to nearing our graduation, like 1 year later, another boy I had been seeing for a while who came to our place for a pre-party. We all left at the same time, Jackie and I shared an apartment, and then went to the party. Jackie left and so did the boy. I figured they were both going to campus together since we had apartments next to each other, and so I just stayed with the rest of my group. I came back, only to hear them having sex. I was devastated. He was my boyfriend, and I finally thought I found the one. It was a few short months, yes, but still, he was so sweet and I thought he cared about me. I knew I needed to get back at her for hurting me, and here is how I did. We both smoked marijuana, heavily. After graduation, I still was pretending to like her. We both moved back home, which ironically was close to each other, and began working at the same hospital as nurses, different units. Our hospital had a strict drug policy which forbid any drug use. I stopped smoking, but she didn't. I would always convince her to, and I'd just have a drink or pretend to take a hit from it. Sometimes I'd even fake roll one and just smoke a cigarette while she smoked marijuana. After about 2 months of me stopping marijuana, and her continuing, I left an anonymous note on my manager's desk saying Jackie is high now. You need to test her. She would never go to work high, just smoke a day before her shift. She was never ever inebriated while working. Well, about 1 hour later Occupation Health came and everyone, doctors, techs, unit clerk, cleaning staff, etc., was tested on the unit, to prevent any discrimination, and if you left, you would be breaking policy and risk termination. Jackie immediately texted me after freaking out in the break room that she needed to talk. I ran up and faked to have no idea and was comforting her saying it'd be fine and nothing to worry about. 1 week later, terminated. She violated the drug policy which results in immediate termination. She was blacklisted at the hospital and all nearby ones as well. Because of the state I was in too, at the time it was a controlled substance, which made it especially bad. We worked at that hospital for only a few months. Now, she has only been able to work in a local office as a nurse and receptionist, making about 1/4 of what she could have been. No other job will hire her. Maybe one a few states away would, but I am not sure. Do I regret this? Yes. I was a butthole and messed up, bad. Will I ever tell her? Probably not. But is karma a witch? Certainly. I put water in my coworker's gas tank and keyed his other car. My coworker is almost 10 years older than me, but he's one of those guys who you'd think they never left the frat life in college. He was always a prick and has horrible work ethic. Nobody likes him, but he's the only one who speaks a language that half of our customers speak, so he makes sales. I work a retail commission-based job. The company won't fire him despite my manager writing him up for lying to customers and just being a bad worker. It all came to a head when he started stealing my sales. To elaborate, if a customer comes in for something and we don't have it in stock, we can order it. If the customer comes to pick it up and the employee who placed the order is not present, the sale has to be put under your name. He not only stole my sales but would throw out my paperwork in hopes that I would forget I placed an order in the first place. I doxed him and found where he lives. I drove 30 minutes out in the middle of the night and opened his gas tank and filled it with 3 bottles of water. This car was an older beater car he would drive because he had a more luxurious car, 60K race car. I couldn't find his luxury car. I'm sure he stores it in the garage. So during work hours I keyed his car over a period of a month, once a week. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to buy forgiveness for your sins. Let us know which of these stories you found most disturbing. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. I told my girlfriend to kill herself and she did. 7 crazy and sad confessions from r/confessions. About a guy that won the lottery but does not tell anyone, a girl that sold her virginity, and a very sad story at the end of the video about a guy who regretted nothing more than telling his girlfriend to kill herself. I snooped through a teacher's phone and found her nudes. This happened about 4 years ago when I was a part of the school newspaper my sophomore year of high school. A little backstory. This teacher was the young hot teacher, so I naturally was crushing on her, like most of the other guys in my school. She was super nice, definitely one of favorites, and we grew into a nice teacher-student friendship. We still keep in contact actually, she's helped me with resumes in college quite a bit. Onto the story, one day I was assigned to do an article about our school's culinary program. They had made a big garden so they could have fresh veggies and herbs. I had finished writing the article and was told to go take pictures, but I had no way to take these pictures. The newspaper didn't have any cameras, so students would just use their phones, but I didn't have a smartphone at the time. My teacher gave me her phone and told me to take the pictures with that. I took her phone and was making my way down the hall to the culinary garden when I had this thought. My teacher crush just gave me her phone, I'm alone, and there could be nudes on this thing. I've used an iPad before, so I knew my way around an iPhone. Now what else would a horny teenager do? I started going through the photos. There were tons of pictures of her and her husband, friends, pets, etc. I started thinking, she's not dumb enough to give her students something with her nudes on it, but I kept scrolling, then it appeared, a full frontal mirror nude. Holy hell, I thought I found the holy grail. My heart started beating so fast in that quiet-ass hallway, I swear you could have heard it. I clicked on it and instantly got rock hard. I proceeded to walk to the garden though, so I kept it together and got those pictures. The whole time I was taking them I still had a boner. Now I'm walking back to my teacher, heart still beating hella hard, horny as hell. This is going to be the only time I see my teacher naked, so better get the most out of it, I thought. I go into the bathroom, lock the stall, and rub one out over my teacher's phone. It didn't take long at all and I busted the biggest nut. I clean myself up, close the Photos app, click the camera app so it looks like I didn't do anything but take pictures, then make my way to the class. I walk in and hand her the phone. She smiles and says, "Get those pictures all right?" I reply, "Yep." I go sit down while she transfers the pictures to her computer and emails them to me. I finish my article and email it to our class editor, and that was the end of it. She never found out and she never asked about it to this day. I've never told anyone this story before today and it'll remain a secret. I sure as hell don't want her to know I did this. Ejaculated on my grandmother's face. One night when I was 14 years old, my grandmother had come to visit us. She slept in my bed and I slept on the couch. At this point in my life, pretty much every night I would wait for everyone to go to sleep and then I would jack off. Even though I was on the couch, I still decided to do it. For some reason, in my horned up state, I got really turned on by the idea of ejaculating on my grandmother's face. So, without really thinking, I went into my room and while she was still asleep I quietly jacked off next to her and then finished on her cheek/neck area. After I finished I left as quickly and quietly as I could and went back to the luge room. I have no idea if she knows what I did. This happened a decade ago and I still hate myself every time I think about it. I don't know what I was thinking. I am an A-list celebrity who hates it. The only reason I haven't killed myself is my kids. I wish I never had kids. I love them, they are the best things that ever happened to me, but I wish I never had them. They'll have to grow up in the life that I fear. They'll never lead normal lives. You know how there are celebrities everyone loves? Well, I am a celebrity people generally hate. I've never done anything bad or illegal. I work hard for my kids and lead a clean life. My husband is also an A-lister and we never get to see one another. Everything I say is quoted in the media. I can't eat in public without a million paparazzi in my face. I can't sleep at night. I have an anonymous Facebook account and I follow posts on entertainment websites about myself, reading the hate comments and going into a depression. I don't know why I do it. I wish I didn't. It just feels like the world is against me. I've been called fat. I've been called dumb. I've seen comments with people saying they wish I killed myself. I have never done anything to harm anyone. I just want to die. I fantasize about killing myself every day, and would have if it weren't for my kids. Everyone thinks I am bubbly and free. I just wish I could stay in a dark room all day and sleep. I feel constantly strained and close to tears. My family and friends are all either famous or living in inaccessible locations. Everywhere I go I am followed by people screaming at me. Paparazzi are scum suckers. They are the worst people in the world. It might seem like I am being harsh, but when you are tired or scared and you have 1,000 cameras in your face and people demanding that you look at them and answer their questions, it hurts. I went through a really hard time a while back and was scared for my life. People said I was attention seeking. Other celebrities I have met are the same. Nobody in this industry is truly happy. I just want to die. I am going to break down any day now. I follow stories. People laughed at Britney Spears, but that stuff happens for real in real life. Robin Williams killed himself. He must have been tortured. It's a bad life, guys. I won the lottery 5 years ago and haven't told anyone. I just got engaged. So after taxes my winnings came to just shy of 4 million. I paid off all my debts, hired an accountant, fixed some things on my truck, and put most of it in savings. I kept my job, didn't move, and kept my mouth shut. My brother is a meth head, my sister is a spiteful whore, and my mom still blames everything on my dad who died 10 years ago, so I didn't want them scrambling to pretend to care about me for cash. I've been dating a girl for about 3 years now and recently asked her to marry me. She said yes. I bought a modest ring, just over what people would expect given my known employment. This weekend I'm going to lay everything out for her and I can truly know she's in it for me and not the money. It's going to liberating to be able to buy what I want and take care of my friends, totally worth the wait. I auctioned off my virginity. I was 18 and really tired of being a virgin. I was super embarrassed. I didn't really have any close guy friends and had no idea how to flirt or even communicate with a guy. I was in a really depressive state. I felt like I missed out on the fundamentals of high school love, especially since I'd been looking forward to it. I also, however, needed some money for school, and really was just craving any sense of excitement in my life. I went to this randomized website that's similar to Craigslist and made a post about my virginity with pictures, and instructions on how my fantasy went. And then set the bids at $1,500 and the bids reached $10,200. It was so weird the amount of guys who just have money like that. Anyways, the guy who had the highest bid was 50 and owned some sort of business in the trades, not sure what. He wasn't ugly, he was actually decently attractive, but then again I was into older guys, so I'm biased. We set up a date and he took me to a nice hotel, bought me a dress, we went to dinner, and when we came back there was flowers, chocolates, and a present for me in the room. And rose petals on the bed and candles lit, all like I imagined since the 8th grade. We had sex, it was okay, I mean I had nothing to compare it to at the time, it felt amazing. But the best part was after, since he made me feel comfortable, and we just talked all night and cuddled and made out. I left the next morning and that was that. I finally could move on with my life and not focus on my virginity. 4 years later and I'm actually a sex addict, so it's weird how I was such a late bloomer, yet so into sex. I am a sex worker and I have a lot to confess. I am an escort who lives in a legal location for prostitution. I have been thinking about how people view my profession and how it makes me feel, among other things. I was reading a comment on a post the other day and I felt awful about it. The comment was along the lines of how most girls wouldn't date a guy who has been with an escort. It made me feel that people view escorts as non-humans or objects. Which honestly I am used to. I've actually wanted to post to roast me stating I am an escort just to see if I am truly desensitized to all of the derogatory names. The profession I am in is so much more than what it appears to be. I've substantially helped many clients with anxiety, loneliness, depression, emptiness, etc. It's been statistically proven that areas with access to sex workers have lower rates of suicide/homicide. At times I feel like I am a sexual therapist. I listen to these men, actually listen. It feels like a slap in the face when most people talk about hookers as objects, gross, or addicts who have daddy issues, etc. The one thing I will admit that is stereotypical is I'm a self-identified sex addict. Yes, some clients are only seeking something they can fulfill outside of their relationships, but even then, I can't tell you how many times I have sat down with a client and gave them advice on how to better connect and restore their relationship. I've also been feeling lately that I view men and relationships so much differently now. I used to be a jealous and controlling person in relationships. I am introverted by nature, so when I would find someone I connected with, I would put all of my energy into them and get possessive out of fear that my relationship could be jeopardized by another person. I eventually decided being alone and fixing myself was for the best. And now, being a single provider, I look at the whole idea of relationships differently. I just see people as time bombs, waiting to get bored, stagnant, resentful of one another, growing apart. It looks like a heartache. I also have become jaded and find men untrustworthy. Yes, I know, it's messed up to generalize a whole gender. I've met so many men who sneak around instead of being honest with their partner. And even though this is my profession, I still root for them to no longer need me and fix their relationship. I fear because of being a sex worker I have been tainted to the idea of love and honesty. And there's times when I have no one to talk to about how I feel. How encounters with certain clients leave me emotionally bankrupt because their energy was so dark. Which I guess led me to posting a confession. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling now. But there's still so much more I could vent about. I've realized in this profession there's never one way to look at everything, and I'm always contradicting myself with how I feel. All in all, though, I do enjoy my work. I like making people happy and helping their mental health, even if it's frowned upon. Sorry if this is jumbled and hard to understand, I wrote it quickly just to vent. I told my girlfriend to kill herself and she did. We had been dating for 3 years and she was my best friend. My first impression was that she was this cute girl who was really fearless and her life was perfect and nothing bothered her. Turns out she was and still is the most unstable person I've ever met in my life. There was a point where she was constantly calling me crying about something that had upset her. Like she found one roach in her new apartment, or because exams were killing her and she's stupid, or because her friends canceled on her, or her father isn't listening to her again. Each and every time she called, I would drop everything I was doing and go help her. It got to a point where I was often sacrificing important matters. One time I even left a job interview for a really good company because she was having a body dysmorphia breakdown. Her mental breakdowns eventually overshadowed all the good times, and I found myself centering all my decisions and time on her. Friends and family started saying this was toxic and she was dragging me down, so I finally broke up with her in person and comforted her for an entire 5 hours after. Just sitting there holding her while she cried. She had begged me to stay and promised she'd get better and that she needed me. That's what kills me every time. After a few weeks of not talking, I tried contacting her just in case she needed help, but she stopped answering my calls. She called me while I was in a class seminar and I got so mad for some reason because everyone could hear my phone ringing and my professor was giving me the murder eye. I got madder than usual, almost freaking lost it, and ended up telling her to F off. That's seriously what I said. And then she started crying and told me she was going to kill herself because she's hurting, and me thinking about all the "she's manipulative and toxic" drift my family and friends were on. I just told her, "Well, do it then," and hung up and went back to class. I don't know why I said those things. I was just really angry and annoyed, but after a few hours, I was okay and tried calling her back to apologize, but she didn't answer. Then I found out from a friend that she killed herself the next day. I think about it every single day and it's literally eating me up inside. I quit college, I'm addicted to stuff that I probably shouldn't even say on here, and no one wants to be around me anymore. I feel like a murderer sometimes. All I needed to do was being there for her, and maybe she wouldn't have done it. Or at least not be an ass and tell her to do it. The funny thing is everyone thinks I did her some good and that it's so beautiful that the love of her life was the last one to talk to her. I keep thinking that maybe if I hadn't been the last one, maybe she'd still be alive. I'm crying now. I'm sorry, Macy. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and consider a subscription if you want more videos. Thanks by the way for anyone that is already subscribed, and for all the interesting and nice comments. Tell us what you think about these confessions. Share your thoughts in the comments. Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. I watched in horror as she struggled to breathe without lungs. 7 confessions of r/confessions that will leave you speechless. About a priest that does not believe in God, a man who killed several people by accident, and a lady who is horribly overwhelmed with her infant child. I put my infant daughter in the closet, shut the door and walked away. I'm so overwhelmed. I haven't really slept in 8 weeks. That's how old my daughter is. She's a beautiful little girl, but she screams and screams and screams. I do everything to console her. I make sure she is fed, dry, not in pain and comfortable. But she almost never stops screaming. My husband left this weekend for a business trip and I was alone with her for the first time. It was going okay this morning, but then the floodgates opened. I held her, rocked her, bounced her, but nothing worked. I wanted to shake her. I'm ashamed to type this, but I wanted to shake my baby. I thought I was about to have a nervous breakdown. I was so fed up that I strapped her into her car seat, placed her in our coat closet and shut the door. She was still screaming and I shut the door on her. I set a 1-hour alarm, went upstairs and collapsed into my bed. I wouldn't say I slept, more like I instantly went unconscious. An hour later my alarm went off and I sprung up and ran downstairs to her. She was sleeping and no longer crying. I picked her up and held her and just started sobbing. It's too much. I'm a terrible mother. I can't handle this. Fuck everyone who says that autism is a gift. It's hell. Throwaway, since my main account is used to promote a podcast and a community, and I try to keep my personal life separated from the podcast life. My soon-to-be 5-year-old son is diagnosed moderate severe autistic. I guess, depending on the spectrum scale or whatever you use, it would be ASD 2.5 or something similar. He's enrolled in a typical school day program, fortunately at the elementary school just down the street from us. And it's actually a good school. The 3 women who run the class that he's in are saints. I'm not. I can't stand that kid. I seriously can't. The hitting, biting, scratching, crashing down on me WWE style when I'm just trying to sit on the couch. The amount of cuts, bruises, and times he's injured me are getting to be too damn much. I get that he doesn't get that he's hurting other people. The wiring isn't there. His older brother who's 7 is suffering for it too, since it's constantly a litany of don't hit back, don't respond in kind or get vengeance. It doesn't do any good. He's gone from being a sweet, awesome little guy into someone who's majorly angry, a lot, and I can't blame him. I'm right there with him. His little brother damn near broke my nose head-butting me when I was trying to just get a shirt on him, and I almost blew up and started hitting him. I recognize that, again, it wouldn't do anything other than result in CPS probably taking him away, but if it was an adult, I'd probably have ended up in jail on assault charges. I'm at the point where I just can't do it anymore. He wakes up screaming in the middle of the night, less if he's sleeping in my bed. I feel guilty every time I'm late at work, go to the gym, go run errands, or anything like that, since it means my wife has to be home alone with him, putting up with the same behaviors and trying to play referee. He makes it impossible to do anything, even something as simple as folding laundry, since he just has this compulsion to wreck anything that's organized. Folding laundry? It's going to be strewn across the house 5 minutes later. If I wouldn't feel like the biggest piece of shit and failure on the planet, I'd say fuck it and leave. I can understand why there are so many single moms of autistic kids. It's literal hell. I have the misfortune to live in Nevada, home of the 49th lowest level of compensation for ABA therapy specialists, so the wait lists to start are minimum 6 months, a year plus depending on who you can see with your health insurance. And the best part? I can't say a fucking word of this to anyone I know. Because then I'm a horrible person. Fuck autism. My boss pissed me off, so I'm catfishing his wife. My boss is generally a dick. I noticed his wife, who also works at the company, came up as a recommended friend on Snapchat. I copied the username and added her on my burner Snapchat. After a few messages and a few fake selfies, she has told me she is single and sent some damn good revealing pictures. I feel a bit guilty now, but damn, she is hot. I am responsible for the deaths of several people. Around 4 years ago, I was a vendor on the darknet. It was a relatively short-lived thing. I was just doing it because I was too lazy to get a job and at the time didn't want to settle for the 9-to-5 thing. I wanted to start my own business, and use the drug money as a startup. I had been using myself for years. Along with it, I met lots of people into the dealing scene, and eventually started dealing myself. I have a lot of anxiety though, so I hated meeting up with people in parking lots, and I definitely didn't want anyone to know where I lived. That's when I read about the Silk Road, and Ross Ulbricht being caught. Got obsessed with the idea of it, got obsessed with learning OPSEC, all with the goal of eventually using my connections to start up my store. Well, after a couple of months I did. I started my store with 3 drugs, ketamine, meth, and some outdoor weed my buddy was getting for super cheap. All was going good for a few months, had a couple thousand get stolen in an exit scam, but I had about $25,000 saved at that point, so it didn't ruin my life like a few vendors I knew of. Eventually, I met a local connect that came into town only once a week, but had anything I wanted. Mescaline, LSD, mushrooms, PCP, even. And fentanyl. At the time, people weren't really cutting heroin with fentanyl. I mean, I'm sure people did plenty, but it was not nearly as commonplace now. People just did fentanyl. And still do. I put all my addresses into an Excel spreadsheet along with their name, zip code, order, along with the amount. At the time, I was selling some super white powdered mescaline. The fentanyl was also a white powder. Very similar consistency. Long story short, my Excel messed up, or I messed up, and about 7 people's mescaline orders were filled in as fentanyl orders. They all went out. I didn't notice and kept doing my thing for a few days. After about 5 days, Someone contacted me and told me their friend died from my mescaline. I immediately called bullshit, and went to check my order log and scale up how much I had of my mescaline left. Well, I had about 11 grams more than I should have. I still don't know how the hell it could have happened. I wasn't a user, but I was definitely high off dabs. I went to check my order log on the market to see if anyone had finalized on their purchase, and a couple of them were. But none from a specific day, including the person that messaged me. No one that had purchased mescaline that day had finalized their orders. The market I was on also had a feature to see the user's last activity, and none of them had logged in at least 3 days. Most 2 days. I immediately deactivated my vendor account. I didn't even need confirmation, I knew what happened. I knew I just killed several people. I sold the rest of my drugs, converted my Bitcoin to cash, and moved the hell away. Didn't speak to anyone for weeks. Found a job in a restaurant, living in a city I always wanted to. I haven't touched drugs since that day. I haven't had anything to do with that life since then. I still think about them. Every night. I saved their names and Googled them a few days later. I was able to find info on 4 customers that definitely died. 1 customer shared it with a friend. They both died. I don't know why I'm even posting this, mainly because I have no one to tell, and even if I did, I don't think I could. I spend my days sober. Clocking into work. Clocking out of work. Coming home. Playing video games. I'm a complete recluse. People I used to know have distanced themselves immensely, and I know it's because I'm a shell of my former self. I can't help it. Could I even tell a therapist about this? I don't feel like I deserve to be alive. Am I really living anyway? I don't even know anymore. Maybe this will help me feel better. I'm a pastor who doesn't believe in God. Here I sit on another Sunday morning. I love the people I minister to. I believe that there are some really good principles in the Bible, and some really awful ones. So I feel okay about the message of love and hope that I get to deliver. I push back against the hate and homophobia and judgmental nature of so much contemporary American Christianity. But I don't believe the underlying myth, and I have to pretend that I do. Overall, I believe I'm doing more good than harm, but there's a dishonesty at the center of it that I have to try to ignore. I'm not economically dependent on ministry work. I work outside the church and do my ministry work on a voluntary basis. I used to get a very small stipend but gave it up a few years ago when I no longer needed it. I wonder all the time whether I am lying, or just withholding, or whether that's a BS distinction. I strive only to say what I believe, but it's a stretch. When I say God is love, I really mean love is God, the highest power. Certainly not Christian orthodoxy. I try hard to teach only what I believe: love, grace, care for others, etc. There are not many other forums where I could deliver that message in the same way. Not an excuse, just a fact. I appreciate the concern of those who feel I'm defiling the faith. I disagree, but humbly. They may be right. I would hate to hurt those who have trusted me. I prayed once for my daughter to die, and it came true. So when I was 20, I started dating this girl. We dated for 3 years, and although she loved me like crazy, I never really loved her at all. The reasons for that are a different story. About 2.5 years into the relationship, we found out she was pregnant. I didn't use a condom once and that's it. After about 6 to 7 months, we found out that she has a damaged reproductive system, and she had to stay in the hospital. I would bring her food and stuff every day after work and basically live in that hospital for 2 weeks. She wasn't allowed to get up or anything. I was by her side through the whole thing. One day out of nowhere, her water broke. She was about to deliver the baby when we talked to some of the hospital staff. They explained that since she was being delivered at that point, she hasn't developed lungs yet, and if we decided to let the hospital staff resuscitate her, she could have permanent brain damage. We decided that if she is born and she is not breathing, we would not resuscitate her. Here's the messed up part. This entire time from the point I found out she was pregnant, I was hoping that something bad would happen so that I wouldn't be stuck in this relationship forever. I started praying that if there was a God, He would get me out of this situation. When the baby was born, I watched her turn blue, then purple, then black right in front of me. I watched in horror as she struggled to breathe without lungs. It was and still is the most horrifying thing I have ever seen. I've lived with this secret my entire life. I've never told a single person. It has given me depression to the point where I've tried to commit suicide, incredible anxiety, and nightmares that I've had ever since. I've been through mental hospitals and therapists as well. I wouldn't wish anything like this on anyone. Thank you for listening and helping me get this off my chest. I have conversations with my dead son in the car. My 13-year-old died in Peru after getting caught in a whirlpool. We were on vacation. His mom, my ex, blamed me for his death, and our other son also blames me, so he doesn't speak to me. He's now 13 too. I don't force him to see me. When I drive home from work, I pretend that I am talking to my son about how his day was at school, what kind of music he wants to listen to, what he wants for dinner, etc. That is why I haven't gotten a new car. There are just too many memories. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more stories about life and death. Share your thoughts about these confessions in the comments below, and let us know which confession you like the most. I killed my grandma with a prank and nobody knows. 7 confessions of r/confessions, about a father who wishes he'd have never adopted his kid, a young woman who killed her brother, and a wannabe pickup artist that gets played. My friend and I have known each other for more than 8 years now. He got a new house about a year ago, and since then we've been spending most of our time at his house, as opposed to the bar. He has a 21-year-old daughter who I don't know very much about. But every now and then we talk. She's just a normal 21-year-old. She is very attractive, of course, but I never thought about doing anything with her. About a week ago I stayed over at his house. I always sleep on the couch in the living room. In the middle of the night she came out of her room to watch television. She was just sitting on the couch opposite to me. We shared brief words here and there when there were ad breaks. As I sobered up a little, I started watching television with her and we started having an actual conversation. We talked about basic things, how she was going in university, her schoolwork, etc. At some point we decided to share a plate of Doritos and we moved to the middle of the couch so we could both reach the plate. As the show ended, we ran out of things to talk about and we wound up kissing and subsequently having sex. I haven't talked to her and I've avoided talking to him as much as possible without having him know that something is wrong. She sent me a message yesterday saying, "I hope you're not upset with me." I didn't reply because I have no idea what to say. I know that it could never happen, but I actually think that she's really cool, although I may be blinded by the fact that she's gorgeous. I have no idea what to say to him and I have no idea what to say to her. All I know is that I had sex with my best friend's daughter and I feel bad for it. I made a mistake in surgery and a baby girl died. Earlier this week I was operating on a baby girl who had a condition I'd rather not share. She was only 1 to 2 weeks old. It is life-threatening and without treatment would almost certainly result in death, especially in her case. It's a fairly rare condition, so I had only ever seen the surgery performed once, in person, before. My attending allowed me to take the lead. I opened her up and assessed. Everything was going as it should, but something went wrong when I was cannulating the aorta. After incising and inserting the cannula, I tightened the purse strings, but the sutures tore through the tissue and she bled out. I managed to recover, but ultimately she had lost too much blood. I have done several aortic cannulations before, but never on a heart this small. After you incise, blood spurts out instantly, so you have to insert the cannula quickly. She was premature and weak, but the bites were improperly spaced and the initial incision was too large. It was my fault and it should have never happened. None of the nurses or assistants knew exactly what occurred, but my attending did. After washing up, he took me aside and told me that her death was my fault and that I had better learn from this and never let it happen again. I had to stand there as he told the parents that there were complications and that she passed away. I saw them break down in tears. That little girl could have had a full life, but I took it away. She should be alive right now, in her parents' arms. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I keep going over it in my head. I'm honestly not sure if I can forgive myself. My coworker is a wannabe red pill pickup artist who has been trying to use his red pill game on me, as one of his platonic female friends. I am messing with him by treating him exactly like the women he has sex with. My coworker dates multiple women and strings them all along via alpha behavior, plating, I think they call it, emotionally manipulating them to be at his beck and call sexually, while simultaneously downplaying and mitigating their own emotional needs. He is very misogynistic and holds a very low opinion of women in general. He is very proud of being able to land any woman he puts his mind to, even though he is average looking and not in that great of shape. He has not come out and said he is a red pill guy, but he is very active online and it would not surprise me in the slightest if he ascribes to that philosophy. His behavior certainly mirrors that. He even complained about being friend-zoned to me the other morning by a girl who had the nerve to take her shirt off after getting drunk at his apartment, but then later, sober, telling him she wasn't interested in him as anything more than a friend. In response to this, he cut the friendship off cold. To his credit, his whole a-hole attitude towards women apparently kind of works, at least with a certain class of desperate women. Anyway, I'm sickened that anyone regardless of their gender would let themselves be treated as a social or sexual commodity like that. But whatever, different strokes and all. I'm not having sex with him, ever, so I don't care much one way or the other. As his friend though, I hold him at arm's length in a way I've never done with my other friends. I'll go hours without answering his texts just to make a point that I'm not at his beck and call. Sometimes he'll call and I won't even bother answering for a couple of days. A few weeks ago he canceled plans to go to the movies with me and made a point to tell me he had made a date to have sex with another woman he met the night before. My less than interested response to this revelation, fine, whatever, not like the theater is going anywhere, noticeably surprised him. A Walt? Not quite. It's like he was expecting me to jump up and get jealous of her or something, or upset that he broke our plans for another woman. Sorry bro, I don't care one way or the other. The next day, after I didn't give him the expected reaction to him canceling our plans, he texted me and wanted to drop everything I was doing to spend time with him. I told him I was busy with some other people and blew him off. I am aloof and show only marginal interest in his romantic conquests, which he feels compelled to talk about in detail. I don't disclose mine at all. He constantly tells me about sex with these women as if he's trying to make some kind of an impression on me about what a Don Juan he is, and I just shrug at him. I allude to doing things with other people on the weekends, but don't invite him to do anything. I make him invite me everywhere and wonder if I will show up. And guess what? He does. He acts just like one of those clingy, dependent, emotional women red pill guys are always getting so high and mighty about. It's almost like my perceived lack of interest in him just makes him even more interested in me. Which is hilarious, because my sexual interest in him is exactly 0% and that's exactly how much sex he will ever get out of our relationship. Not every woman can be played. Especially when they know the rules of the game. I killed my grandma with a prank and nobody knows. The year was 2012 and I was 18 years old. I had moved out of my parents' house and was living 3 hours north of my family. I got a girlfriend for the first time and I told my family all about her on the phone. My grandma was a super nice Christian woman. I loved her to death and I struggle every day knowing what I did. Obviously with her Christian beliefs I should be waiting till marriage to have sex, and she told me that growing up, but I didn't really hear much about it anymore after I got to around the age of 12. So one day I got this bold idea to prank my grandma. I called her on the phone and asked her to please be patient with me and not to speak out of anger once I tell you what happened. Then I proceeded to explain to her that my girlfriend was pregnant followed by choking sounds on her end and I instantly knew I had messed up. I hung up the phone after calling her name for 2 minutes and called my dad who rushed over to her house to find her laying cold on the basement floor. To this day nobody knows what we talked about on the phone and everybody is happy for me because I was able to have a conversation with her right before she passed. They tell me to stay positive and to know that she didn't die alone. She passed from an unexpected heart attack. Kill me God. I wish we had never adopted this kid. My wife and I had been trying for a couple of years to have our own kids, but found out we could not. So, we went the way we had talked about many times before, and went through adoption. Because, hey, every kid needs a home, right? That's when we came across our now adopted son, Nate. Nate was the bastard son of a whore of a mom who had sex with whomever she could for drugs, money, etc. His bio father had some sense and convinced mom to put all 3 of her kids. Nate was the only one of his. The other 2, a brother and sister, were from unknown fathers. She agreed. And that was when Nate was about 6. He was technically removed due to deplorable living conditions and abuse, but she didn't fight to keep him. We met him for the first time last year. I was sketchy on him. He appeared to have ADHD. Not a deal breaker, but wouldn't have been my first choice. He never looked at us, jumped up and ran around the restaurant we met at, and had a hard time focusing. Hell, he's a 9-year-old kid. Kids have a hard time sitting still, and get nervous. I figured. My wife fell in love with him. I was still sketchy, but we had met other kids, so he wasn't our first choice at the time. We started getting more info on him, planned on meeting him more, etc. It was a learning curve. We took him to Chuck E. Cheese, just to hang with him for a day. He was all over the place. Kids. No biggie. We started finding out more from the foster parents, who we didn't care for. They seemed to be brainwashing their kids, and seemed to be in it for the money. Nothing major, but I was still being cautious. We figured maybe he had either ADHD or some high-functioning autism. Again, not a deal breaker, but it was something I'm not used to. My wife had experience, volunteer and career, with special needs children. He seemed to be growing on us. Called us mom and dad once. We started having fun together. It seemed to be a good fit. We noticed, closer to the day we took him home for 6 months before finalizing the adoption, he had addictions. Mostly video games. Not too unusual, again, he's a kid. Kids are supposed to love video games. Hell, we both like them. Why not? But he became aggressive. Like, wouldn't listen to you, and if you turned them off or threatened to take them away, he'd become violent to throwing the controller, kicking a chair, etc. We nipped that in the bud as soon as possible, limiting him and explaining why. We eventually took it away altogether, maybe explained later. He saw several therapists and several other professionals. One diagnosed him with ADHD. Another thought autism. Another thought reactive attachment disorder. All seemed less than great. But we're attached. We'd get through this. That was about a year ago now. Ever since then, at least every other day, if not every day, we have had to put him in restraints, all okay per DHS, his therapist, and others. We've had to get onto him. We've tried different reward systems. We've tried second chances. We've tried everything we can think of. Hell, even trying to show unconditional love, when we feel nearly defeated. He's constantly lying about everything and anything. He plays dumb, he threatens to be bad, which we aren't afraid of. We've shown him many times we're not afraid of him. He breaks things, he has no emotions, anything. Never shows remorse, unless he's told to. Tell them you're sorry. Does what he wants, even when he knows it's going to get things taken away. He's tried, and somewhat succeeded, to hurt his dog, several times, because he wants to see how it feels pain. He's been pure hell. He understands, but doesn't care, from what we can tell. Just tonight, we had a date night, and dropped him off to a parents' night out group at the local Y. We had a great time, just being able to be ourselves. We get back, I go in to pick him up. The assistants there pull me aside and tell me he was caught trying to grab several girls' privates. Twice. That was all the info I needed. I grabbed him, a bit embarrassed, brought him to the car and had him explain to my wife what happened. Of course, we've been talking to him for several hours now, explaining why that was bad, etc. But, again, he shows no remorse and just makes up excuse after excuse. Long story short, he wanted to, and so he did. After everything we've been through, I honestly regret adopting him. I don't know if I'd adopt again if given the chance. Even if given the chance to go back in time and change my mind on him and switch to another kid, I don't think I would. We'd be much happier without him, or any other child in our home. I wish Nate had never come into our lives. And I'm pretty much sure my wife wishes the same thing. I have a micro penis. My penis is about 2.5 inches erect. I've never told anyone about it. I don't want anyone to know. They will think that I am less of a man. At the very least they will pity me, which is even worse. I'm not overweight or anything like that, it's just the way it is. I'm a virgin, never done anything with a girl. I'm average in terms of looks. I'm short but girls show interest occasionally. I'm scared to do anything. I'm 19 and in college, so everyone around me is having sex all the time and I have to just feign laughter as guys tell me that they had sex with this really hot girl last night. It's great. I've known that my penis was small since I was 14, but I assumed that it would grow eventually. It didn't. I've read just about every single article, study and forum post about micro-penises, and the consensus is that women don't get pleasure from penetrative sex at all. In movies you see the two main characters get together and it's very romantic, they kiss and start to have sex, they're both moaning and loving it. It seriously breaks my heart to know that I'll never be able to give a woman that experience. I know that I can learn to give cunnilingus, and I've read a lot on the topic, but it's just not the same. Women talk about being filled up like it's the most amazing feeling in the world. It hurts to know that I can't provide that feeling. I've tried to kill myself before. I broke into a building and was standing on the roof about to jump, but I just couldn't do it. I stayed there for hours trying to find the balls to do it, but apparently they're small too. I hate it so much. The thought of a woman laughing at me when the clothes come off is terrifying. Very few women would accept a man with a micro penis, and even if there was a woman who could, she would always think about a guy who was larger. Penetrative sex is off the table, so she would probably seek it elsewhere. I know I probably sound like a whiny little witch, and I most likely am, but it just really sucks. When I was 15, I had some of my friends over while I was watching my 11-year-old brother. My parents worked a night shift and I had to babysit him often. Which I did not mind because I'd usually bring my friends over, and my brother wouldn't care really. It was around 10 p.m. and it was on a Friday and my brother was asleep, so we wanted to have some fun. So one of my friends brought over weed. We were in my room and one of my friends knew how to block the smell of the weed with this thing he made that would block the weed smell so we could smoke in the house. After we all ended up getting high, we decided we wanted to chill in the basement. We were down there for around 15 minutes. Eventually we wanted to go up to my room again. When we opened the basement door, the whole house was foggy and smelled like smoke, and I could see the fire spreading to our downstairs living room area, since our house was 2 stories. I grabbed my phone and I opened the exit of the basement door, and me and my friends ran out as quickly as possible while I called 911. My brother was upstairs sleeping and all I could remember was just crying, coughing and being so dizzy from the shock and the smoke. I called my parents too and they rushed home, and they got here after the ambulance and firefighters. When my parents got home, the fire in the house was gone, and I remember the paramedics rushing my brother on a stretcher into the ambulance. My mom went in the ambulance with my brother and my dad drove us to the hospital. We found out most of his body had 3rd-degree burns, and he was unstable and unconscious due to the smoke. I was not allowed to see my brother while I was there, and I had to keep waiting for my mom and dad to tell me everything was okay. My parents and I stayed at the hospital all night and a little into the morning, and eventually my mom and dad came out, because they were allowed to see him, to tell me that he was passing away due to the smoke inhalation. After our house was investigated for what could have started the fire, we were told that it started in my room and they found a metal lighter. I remember bursting into tears telling my parents why I had a lighter in my room and what happened, and I remember saying it was all my fault. To this day I still feel the worst amount of guilt for what happened, and my parents have told me so many times that I didn't know that this would happen. They said they weren't angry with me, but I still feel like they had some sort of anger towards me at that moment. The house was completely gone, and we were lucky we had insurance and were even able to afford a new one. I'm 20 now, and I go to college and have a part-time job, but the guilt still haunts me so much, and I think about how my brother would have gone on to do amazing things. I know deep down that it wasn't completely my fault and that I didn't know this would happen, but it still did. My mom and dad tell me all the time that they aren't angry with me and that I was young and didn't know that this would have happened. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more confessions. Share your thoughts about these stories in the comments below, and remember, Parasite Man could be among your friends or family. You never know. Warning. This content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. I ran up behind her and grabbed her hair, I dragged her out onto the back lawn, and I bashed her face about 15 times. 5 dark stories from r/confessions that will make you question humanity. My aunt hit my mother, so I dragged her across the floor and punched her till she passed out. My aunt is a poisonous woman. Our whole family doesn't talk to her. She's done things in the past you wouldn't believe. So she left our lives years ago. Recently she returned out of the blue at my mom's house. My mom has 2 other sisters and a brother. My mom and aunt never got on. My mom is a lovely person, but she could sense from a young age something was off about her sister, so she kept her distance. My aunt was nasty and would hurt people's feelings intentionally for no reason. She never had a partner or kids. She isolated herself from everyone. My gran cut her off when she tried to steal thousands of dollars from her. We all genuinely think there's something physiologically wrong with her. So back to where I was going with this. One morning I was at my mom's house, just chilling out, and there was a knock at the door. So I opened it and there she was. She walked in. She looked like she had took drugs. She looked dead behind the eyes. I tried to stop her but she pushed me down. I honestly don't know why she came to my mom's house out of everyone. I quickly got up and she went into the kitchen. She startled my mom and punched her in the face. My mom didn't even have a chance to blink before she hit her. She went down like a ton of bricks. My heart felt like it had been sucked through into my stomach when I seen it. Something came over me. I don't know if it was anger or adrenaline, but I ran up behind her and grabbed her hair and I dragged her out onto the back lawn and I bashed her face about 15 times, Blood was everywhere. Thankfully no one seen me, or I might not have been writing this right now. I got up and I left her there. I went to check my mom. She was in a lot of pain. I looked back out the window and she was gone. We told our family immediately about this and they were perplexed and angry as to why she just turned up and attacked my mom. I'm still so hurt and angry as I write this. But I also feel tremendously guilty and upset that I done that to her, because I've never fought anyone and I'm not a fighter at all. But something came over me and I snapped. I can't get over it for some reason. It just seems so unreal and there was no reason for the attack. God forbid she had a weapon. That's truly scary to think about. We didn't call the police, as I assaulted her badly and didn't want it to bounce back on me. That's another thing I feel ashamed about. But should I feel bad or not? I need others' opinions, as I've been bottling this up for a while. My gran was devastated. She just wanted her daughter back, but from a young age she took to drugs, spent time in prison and amount of other things. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be saved. I lied to my best friend to get off the phone, not knowing he was writing his suicide note and just wanted one last chat. One day after school I was with a few friends and we were all smoking. At some point during the session I got a call from my best friend, who sounded a bit out of it, and didn't really seem like he had any other intention than to just have a conversation. We spoke for about 2 minutes and then it was my turn in the circle, so I told my friend that my phone was about to die, so I was going to have to get back to him. The next day I awoke to multiple missed calls from his mother. I called her immediately and she told me that he had hanged himself and that he was in a coma. I would then go on to spend 4 days in a hospital by his side for the most part. On the 4th day they turned his life support off. During all of this I checked his phone, as I was the only person who knew his passcode, and I found a suicide note. The timestamp was around the time that he had called me the day before. I'm not sure if I will ever get over the fact that I gave up my last conversation ever with the greatest person I've ever known for a bar. Don't take those you love for granted. I saw a woman get raped and didn't call the police. She was killed afterwards. This was in 2007, in Chicago. I used to live in a cruddy neighborhood with a lot of abandoned warehouses and such. I woke up to the sounds of this weird screaming and yelling in Spanish, coming from the alleyway near my house. I had no idea what she was saying, but I looked over, and a girl was bent over backwards getting effed. I just figured she was yelling in happiness or something loudly, and closed my window. About 10 to 15 minutes later, I heard her scream way louder, like a lot. I looked over out the window again and she was gone, and the guy was still there. I had no idea what had happened. I just closed my window again and went back to bed. Next day, I woke up to cop cars all throughout the block. I figured something bad had happened, but I really had no idea what, and I was scared to ask because I felt I might be pressured to be a witness or something. I just stayed in my house and looked out my window. I would end up searching newspapers and internet for the next few days trying to find out what happened. I found out. The guy was a John, she was a prostitute. He broke her arm in the car, dragged her to the alleyway and raped her, then took his baseball bat and started hitting her over and over again. She managed to escape into the street, but he found her and bashed her head in with the baseball bat and killed her. He was arrested with a bloody baseball bat in his apartment and some heroin. I could have called the police the first time when I heard her yelling and saw them having sex, and none of this would have happened. Cops typically take 10 minutes to respond to stuff like that, and they were in that alleyway for at least 15 minutes. The house next to me was vacant, so I was the only one who could have called the cops. I feel really awful, just absolutely horrible. I could have saved her life but instead was so sleepy that I didn't. The sounds of her screams horrify me to remember. I can hear them so clearly in my head. I used to be a white supremacist. About a year ago I joined a group of men that advocate for white nationalism and other far-right nonsense. To be honest, I didn't care or like any of these people in the slightest. The only reason I joined them was because some of my friends were going to that side of the political spectrum and they were getting angry about stupid political stuff like I was. I did a lot of crazy stuff like vandalism and basically getting drunk with other skinheads and Aryan Brotherhood drug dealers. I slid down into this kind of spectrum. I acted like a fool and made myself look stupid. Eventually, after a few crazy events happened, I stopped talking to my white nationalist friend and started doing my own thing for a while through mostly work. I got this crazy idea to actually go to a synagogue, a mosque, and a church just out of fun. When I went to these places, almost all of those people treated me very well, including an elderly Jewish couple. They treated me like a part of their own family and introduced me to their kids. The Muslims treated me the same way and even gave me some free classes about the Quran. But I think the worst part of all was when I went to a Catholic church and I saw every race on the face of the planet in the small town I used to live in. And I felt so bad about this whole thing. Because I had judged a lot of these people before they even knew me. But in all honesty, I'm sorry I did some bad things to these people and I don't want any harm to them. I guess I'm glad that God helped me realize what I did was wrong and I don't want anyone to do the same things I did. But again, I'm sorry for what I did. I hope some of you can forgive me. I beat up a kid because he kicked my elderly dog. When I was 23, my 14-year-old Beagle Mix was diagnosed with a fast-acting cancer that had already started to spread. I'd had him since he was 1 and I made it my mission in life to keep him as comfortable and happy as I could. There was nothing he loved more than walking in the park, so I packed him up in the car and went for a short and slow walk every day. He was the sweetest, friendliest boy, so it was absolutely shocking when on one of our walks, a boy we'd never seen before, who was probably 10 to 11 years old, ran up to us screaming, "I hate your ugly, gross dog, lady." My initial response was okay, well, we're just passing by, so goodbye then. Then the little jerk let out an inhuman screech and ran forward and kicked my dog in the stomach. My poor boy yelped and whimpered and crumpled to the ground in pain, and the kid laughed in that horribly demonic way only a child can laugh, and then reeled back to kick again. Before that moment, I had never experienced rage as an adult. I'm pretty evenly keeled person, and I'm typically a pacifist and diplomat. This was the first and only time in my life that I saw red. Before my brain had even processed what happened, I'd already lunged at the kid and sort of half grabbed, half shoved him by the neck, and pushed him to the ground very hard. He immediately burst into tears, and that's when I should have stopped. But I couldn't stop. It was the only time in my life when I felt like I wasn't in control of my actions. The kid was scrambling to get up and I kicked him really hard in the side, several times. Then I grabbed him by his sweatshirt hood and screamed in his face at the top of my lungs. I screamed some really horrible things at him, something like that I'd find him and kill him slowly if he ever tried to hurt another animal again, but it felt like the words were just erupting out of me with no thought or effort. At that point the kid was ugly, sobbing and apologizing and begging me to let him go, which I guess helped me to snap out of it, because I felt myself, for lack of a better description, return to my body. I felt totally numb and sort of inebriated, but the rage was gone. I let the kid go, and told him to go find his mom, and hastily added, "And don't ever kick a dog again." He ran off crying. I scooped my dog up, hustled to my car and left. I was oddly calm. I drove to the vet and told them only that a child had kicked my dog and ran away, and I wanted to get him checked out. They checked him out and said there was no serious damage, other than the beginnings of a bruise. I drove us home, got into the shower and sobbed for hours. I had no idea until then that I was capable of doing anything like that. I started therapy the next week to deal with the anger issues I didn't know I had until then, and I've never had another issue like that. I didn't go back to that park for years, for fear of running into that kid again, mostly for fear that his parents would be there and get me arrested. I took Freddie to a different park, that was a little further from the house, but he actually liked it more because it had good soft dirt to dig in, until his final day on Earth. I think about that kid sometimes, though. I wonder how my actions impacted him. Did I scare him straight? Did I teach him to be more violent? Does he have some complex about short women now because a short woman beat him up when he was a kid? He's got to be at least a teenager now. I wonder how often he thinks about it, if ever. I wonder if he sees himself as being entirely the victim, or if by now he's loved and lost a pet, and understands the drive behind what I did. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and leave a like. Thanks to the people who already have subscribed. And, Alexa, add Parasite Man to my shopping list. Share your thoughts about these confessions in the comments below. I wish my sister had died. 3 brutally honest stories from r/confessions that will make you question everything. Beware, the last story is not dark, but positive. I know, weird. I wish my sister had died. My sister is 5 years older than me, but you wouldn't know it. She was born with a list of medical problems: cerebral palsy, epilepsy, verbal dyspraxia, profound deafness, severe brain damage. The doctor said she wouldn't live beyond a day, but she did. I wish she hadn't. When I was born, my sister was in another hospital, in another state. She was seriously ill. They thought she might have Ebola. My mother found out later that she was just having a severe allergic reaction to her epilepsy medication, but at the time, they thought she'd die. The instant I was born, I was handed off to a doctor and my mother flew to meet my sister in the hospital. My brother and I were left with a nanny, as my father worked 14-hour days. I didn't meet my mother until I was 8 months old. That set the pace for the rest of my life. My childhood was a whirlwind of moving from state to state, closer to whatever hospital had a program that would help her at the time. My brother and I were always pushed to the side. My mother was never really around, leaving us with our father for weeks at a time to be with my sister in the hospital. It took my mother years to figure out that he had an alcohol problem and had been abusing my brother and me. Still, she couldn't do anything, because he paid my sister's medical bills, and even if she left him, she needed to be a stay-at-home parent for my sister. So my brother and I fought through. We rarely got attention from our mother even when she was home, and never stayed in a place long enough to make any connections. There are other things people don't think about. My sister was older than I, so I'd copy her in a lot of things, but ultimately, I'd be blamed if something happened. I was to blame if she bit me and I struck out to get her off me, and accidentally hurt her. "She's too fragile," my mother would scold, before leaving to reassure my sister, unaware that my father would take a belt to my butt for hurting the precious one. I had to know how to perform CPR at 5, and had to deal with my sister's seizure alone for the first time when I was 6. Calling the emergency number in my country didn't stop the horror I'd been exposed to. My father pulling a gun on us when I was 9 was what finally convinced my mother that my brother and I couldn't stay there anymore. We were moved across the country, once again had to leave everything behind. We were homeless and stayed with my mother's family while she stayed in a hotel near the house she wanted to renovate for us. During that time, it was my and my brother's duty to care for my sister. I hated it. At 9 years old, my aunt would drag me out of bed in the middle of the night and make me change the sheets on my sister's bed because she'd begun menstruating, and obviously, this wasn't a duty my brother could help me with, since he was a boy. A few months in, and my cousins invited over a friend. I knew something was off. He made crude jokes and liked playing with me and my female cousin, who was only a year older than me, too much for someone who had to be pushing 19. My mother had told me never to sleep in the same bed with a boy, but that night, I had to make a choice. My aunt, a deluded woman, asked if I wanted to share my bed with the creepy family friend, or if my sister should. I made a choice, based on everything I'd been told throughout my life. You were only born to support your sister, your sole job is to protect her, it's your life duty, and I told her he could share my bed. I guess you can imagine what happened. He molested me. It hurt. I remember holding a wet cloth between my legs and crying, just wishing someone would hold me. He did it 3 more times, each of those times I'd go into it, knowing what to expect, but knowing my sacrifice would mean my sister wouldn't have to deal with it. I suspect my brother was also molested around that time. So it's no surprise that when we finally did move into a house, just the 4 of us, that my brother and I were emotionally wrecked. 2 little kids that had gone through hell, but my sister was always the priority. Her wounds were visible. More important, my brother and I began being left alone. I got into self-harm and started starving myself, not because I particularly disliked the way I looked, but because I had been taught from very early on that when your anger passes a certain point, you either take it out on yourself or others. I knew how much it hurt to have anger taken out on you, so I took my anger out on myself to spare anyone else that pain. I wanted to destroy myself, I was so furious. Now, my sister treats me like a slave. She had no idea the sacrifices I've made for her, the way I gave up my mother, my friends, my mental state and my virginity to save her. She wouldn't appreciate it if she knew, either. Her brain works at that of a 3-year-old level. She's been spoiled by everyone her entire life, because of her disabilities, so she treats me like crap. My mother lets her, to avoid dealing with one of her tantrums. Other people treat me like her personal helper dog. They see her in a wheelchair and demand I translate, in sign language, some kind compliment to her without even asking my name or making eye contact with me. I'm just her assistant. I know it's illogical to blame her for all these things that are beyond her control, to resent her like this, but I can't seem to help it. I haven't hurt her since I was 8 and I scratched her cheek, and I would never dare hurt her, but I hate her with a fiery passion. I fantasize about her dying and for a moment feel relief. I know that my life would have been a lot easier if she hadn't lived past her first day. I lied to everyone, my accidental Craigslist baby. I had a baby with donated sperm from a man I met via Craigslist. I am a woman in my mid-40s. I'm smart, friendly, kind, helpful, active, and interested in the arts and sciences. I have a decent job and live in a mid-sized metropolitan area. I am not being coy when I say I'm ugly. Like, really ugly. For real. It's plain and simple that I did not make out when it came to genetics. I have never had a boyfriend and I've never been loved because the one thing you are not allowed to be if you are a woman is ugly. Hell, I'm so ugly, I don't even have that many friends. The only sex I've had has been with men who are too drunk to care. The ones who, after their beer goggles wear off in the morning, probably feel dirty and ashamed they hit something as ugly as me, and swear not to get that drunk ever again. All this while they make as quick an escape as possible. As if ugly is catching. I have often wished I were gay because gay women don't seem to judge each other as harshly as men do. That's the honest truth. I'm okay with knowing I'll never have a boyfriend or husband, in knowing that I'll never know the love of a partner. It hurts, sure it does, but I've also come to accept my lot in life as far as that's concerned. Also, now that I'm ugly and in my mid-40s, I have suddenly become invisible and that feels better somehow. Side note, please remember that ugly people can be pretty nice, cool, interesting, funny, kind, wonderful people. Those traits do not disappear just because someone is ugly. For a long time I naturally assumed that meant I would never have children either. No husband equals no children. That part hurt a lot. I knew I'd make a really great mom if someone would give ugly a chance. No one ever did. But then it occurred to me that one day I could try to have a kid if I damn well wanted, husband or not. This is my life and I only get one shot at it. I should do what makes me happy, do what I want in my life so I don't have major regret later. I don't have any addictions or mental health issues and I'm a good person. So I decided to have one. I had a few problems, though. Judgment from friends and parental wrath, they are religious. I'm older for someone trying to get pregnant so it would cost more money than I have for IFV or donor sperm or adoption. All that stuff is expensive. My parents probably would have disowned me, I never would have heard the end of it, to try to have a baby out of wedlock? The horror. The sin. My parents don't let things go, harp harp harp. My father has a nasty, mean streak too. I didn't need the stress, so I kept it 100% to myself, even my best friend doesn't know. She would judge me and try to talk me out of it. She's not a kid person, she's very against children and speaking on zero population growth, etc. Downright hates kids. And so her feelings about children would be projected onto me. This is the first time I'm telling anyone the real truth. I also certainly could not afford IFV, fertility treatments or to pay for donor sperm, etc. Adoption is also crazy expensive. So I did the research and came up with my own, semi-dangerous plan. I am in my mid-40s so my chance of conceiving is lower, but I've had a regular period forever so I hoped my chances were still reasonably good. Step 1. So I read up on fertility treatments and purchased Clomid from an overseas online pharmacy. Clomid is a drug that is used to help women ovulate. Step 2. Donor semen. Did you know that there are men on Craigslist willing to donate their sperm to help women conceive? I think it's mostly a fetish for them, but who cares? I trolled Craigslist for a few months, interviewing about 8 different men. I weeded out the guy who only wanted to do it naturally and wouldn't do a donation in a cup, as to me that was suspicious. If you are willing to donate, why does it have to be penis in a vagina? So yeah, I weeded out those men who wouldn't agree to be STD tested, men who just seemed weird. After much search I found a very reasonable man. I told him the truth, that I was ugly and therefore couldn't find a mate but wanted children. He was fine with that. He is married with 5 children, has an advanced degree, a professional position and was willing to do a donation in a cup. That he was wanting to donate in a cup, that right there told me wasn't a Craigslist creeper. His wife knows and approves of what he is doing. We met for coffee a few times to get to know one another. He was decent looking, cordial, friendly and was wanting to donate to help women and couples who couldn't otherwise conceive. He had already donated to 2 lesbian couples and 1 hetero couple who needed it and all 3 of them were successful and had children. He also donated to 1 other single woman who was older like me, but she couldn't get pregnant after 1.5 years of trying. All of his connections were via Craigslist and all because doing it through proper channels is very, very expensive. He did all of his donations via cup, not the natural way and had been STD checked recently. Plus had a lab report to prove it. Totally on the up and an all-around nice person. We didn't sign any papers, it was a, "I'll trust you if you trust me" kind of deal. I tried for about 10 months, tracking my ovulation with a thermometer, etc. I would tell him I was ovulating and we'd drive to meet that day. He would jerk off into cervical cap and I would place it inside me. Sometimes we had to meet in a parking lot somewhere because that's how our schedules overlapped, and I kid you not, this will sound creepy but he had a van, which made it much easier to do the jerk off than insert cup thing. Month after month of disappointment. I was beginning to think I was just too old. I then decided to go ahead and invest in a Clearblue Easy fertility monitor. It was $200 with the sticks, but turns out the best thing I bought. Basically you pee on these sticks each morning, the monitor that reads how much of whatever hormones it checks for and tell you how fertile you are. Turned out to be a great investment and one I wished I'd sprung for earlier in the process. I got pregnant on the second month of using it. I told everyone that it was an accident. My parents were supportive of me keeping it because to them abortion is bad blah blah religion. And so far my friends have been supportive too. I had an easy pregnancy and easy labor and delivery, and now I have a healthy baby who is under 1 year. I don't want to say exact age or gender. It was the best thing I ever did. I've never been happier. It's going to be a struggle, but I feel fulfilled as a human being and as woman. I'm every day extremely grateful to the man who donated his sperm to an ugly girl to make a beautiful baby. I may be ugly, but it turns out I'm an excellent mother. I started dating my wife, to show her best friend that I would make a good boyfriend. In high school, I was in love with my wife's best friend, Emily. Emily didn't like me at all the year I met her. She told all of her friends I was creepy and ugly and generally was shitty to me. I didn't particularly like Emily back then, though I thought she was incredibly attractive. Our school assigned a summer project, and by luck of the draw I got paired with Emily. At first we just talked about project stuff, but we kind of clicked and became friends. We would talk on the phone or over AIM for hours every day about personal stuff. At the time I was single, but had a friend who I would hang out with and frequently post pictures to social media of us. I told Emily she was my girlfriend. Partly so that Emily would think I was no longer pursuing her and feel more comfortable with me. Partly so that I could make up stories of elaborate dates to try to impress her. Emily had a deep desire for romantic night outs. She was quite used to guys wanting to sex with her. I'm sure most 17-year-old tens are. But she hadn't had any of her romantic fantasies fulfilled, and it was a sore point for her, that I knew I could poke at with these stories. She'd listen to me talk about this fictional relationship, completely entranced. She'd tell me over and over it's what she wanted. School started back up. Me and my girlfriend broke up. Emily and I would hang out a lot and talk. I tried to get her to go out with me, but she wouldn't. Some of our mutual acquaintances told me that she liked me a lot, but still thought I was creepy and unattractive, and that she didn't like some of my mannerisms. I had a lot of nervous tics back then. I started dressing better and lifting and making a conscious effort not to be so twitchy. A few months later, Emily told me that her best friend, Sierra, liked me a lot. It came completely out of left field for me. I had said maybe 10 words to this girl in the year and a half I knew her. We had a couple of classes together and that was it. We had nothing in common except friendship with Emily. No shared interests, or beliefs or values. Polar opposite personalities. Still, we were both teens. I was super horny and she had big tits, a small waist and a big ass. So I was good to go. Shortly after, Emily also found a boyfriend. I asked her out and took her on really elaborate dates. I really tried to play up an emotional and romantic angle without pushing very hard for sex. Dinner, movies, long walks and talks, Starbucks, bowling, dancing, whatever Sierra wanted. Whatever I knew Emily wanted. Very little sexual pressure, because I knew that was the sort of date Emily wanted, and she was the real target. I'd take Sierra out on a 12-hour date, full of things she loved, and then go home and brag to Emily about it. Emily got it from both ends, because her best friend would also tell her the same stories. Meanwhile, Emily would complain that her boyfriend had taken her to a restaurant she didn't like, because he had a coupon, and then tried to force her to blow him in his car. She'd listen to my stories, completely spellbound, and tell me over and over that they were exactly what she wanted. I knew they were. I had been engineering the dates that way on purpose. My plan was to wait for Emily and her boyfriend to break up, find a reason to break up with Sierra on as good of terms as humanly possible, and then make a rebound move on Emily. I dated Sierra for a summer. Every date was elaborate and long. At first, it was just to put on a show for Emily, but I started to really enjoy my time with Sierra. Despite having nothing in common, and conflicting personalities, we fit together really well. And we had the same ideals for a future life. Plus, Sierra was insanely hot. It wasn't hard to get Sierra to fall in love with me, and I was becoming increasingly attached to her. I decided to abandon my plans to date Emily, and focus on Sierra. I knew I wanted a wife, and Sierra and I somehow matched perfectly, so I took things as deep as I could. She told me she loved me. I took her virginity. She was so in love she was eating out of my hand, and willing to do anything I wanted. More than that, I had fallen in love with her too. We were practically picking out a house and coming up with names for children at this point. I began paying less attention to, and spending less time talking to Emily. I didn't realize it at the time, but this was making her intensely jealous of Sierra. About a month after I made the decision to focus on Sierra, Emily and her boyfriend had a spectacular blowout of a breakup. Emily called me, minutes after her last date with her boyfriend, crying her eyes out. I was on the phone with Sierra and told Emily that I would talk to her later. Emily then called Sierra and yelled at her. Emily told Sierra that she had me first and that I wanted her first and that the only reason we were together was because she put us together. Sierra snapped and cut Emily completely out of her life. They went from being best friends for years to hating each other overnight. Sierra still hates Emily to this day. Neither of us has spoken to Emily in years. Sierra and I have been happily married for half a decade. I bought a house for us and we are working on children. I haven't told Sierra any of this, and probably never will. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and leave a like. Check out our Confessions playlist linked in the subscription. It includes the famous Parasite Man. And let us know what you think about these stories in the comments below. Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. I nearly committed a school shooting. 10 of the darkest Reddit confessions, about suicide attempts, messed up fetishes and awkward situations. Try not to cry at the last story. I have lived with pinworms for over 10 years. I remember first realizing what they were in high school and am now 30. There are stretches that I don't remember having, but for the most part they have been ever present since I was in 8th grade. I am a pretty well put together person with a nice paying job. I keep in shape and shower and am a clean person. I have a fiancé that I love a lot. It's not that I don't want to get rid of them, I have tried, I am just too lazy to do all of the stuff required to really rid them once and for all. I take the deworming medicine but do not do all of the steps like making sure each and every piece of clothing and bed sheet is washed at the same time. I also have a bad habit of chewing my fingernails which contributes. It feels like I could do all of that and they will still come back. So now I feel helplessly resigned to living with them.